Chapter 6:14. The ninth floor was the top floor of the hospital and also the quietest area in the whole hospital. Occasionally, nurses and doctors shuttled back and forth with light and quick footsteps. Everyone's face was tense and solemn. As soon as the elevator door opened, Li Tianlan noticed a few bright red letters on the wall. He didn't understand English and didn't know the full name of these letters, but he knew the meaning of these letters when put together. The ninth floor was the most serious place in the hospital. The intensive care unit, or the intensive care unit. Li Tianlan looked at the bright red letters in front of him and was silent for a long time. His breathing was getting deeper and deeper. Under his calm and emotionless cold eyes, his breath was trembling slightly. Dongqing Rushi was the only injured person in the intensive care unit. Li Tianlan didn't want to think about the worst, but she stayed here. Even in the most optimistic view, Dongqing Rushi was still in danger. The Wang family of Beihai. The Devil Troop. Wang Tianzong's exchange. The Sword Emperor wanted to use the Devil Troop to exchange Li Tianlan, but Dongqing Rushi was seriously injured. Wang Tianzong wouldn't think it was worth it. Li Tianlan wouldn't think it was worth it either. Neither of them was worth it. Li Tianlan walked out of the elevator and clenched his fists calmly. Light footsteps sounded in the corridor. Bai Qingqian, who was wearing a light-colored home dress and slippers, turned the corridor and was stunned when she saw Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan was also stunned. He opened his mouth and didn't know what to say for a moment. Bai Qingqian's eyes were still soft. Li Tianlan didn't even see any blame in her eyes. For the first time in his life, Li Tianlan experienced what it was to be ashamed. In her eyes, which were still tolerant and soft, he lowered his head and wanted to find a place to hide. Bai Qingqian walked over and reached out to touch his head. She said softly, "I know you woke up and came to the hospital. I came out to pick you up." "Auntie." Li Tianlan's voice was hoarse and muddle-headed. His voice seemed to be squeezed out from his teeth with great difficulty. "I'm sorry." Silly boy." Bai Qingqian grabbed his hair. This strong woman, who had always been strong and could even be said to be ruthless when facing her opponents in the outside world, did not have the slightest bit of it at this time. In Spearhead, Dongqing Rushi was in a coma. Li Tianlan was in a coma. She looked a little haggard after running around in the prince's mansion hospital, but she was still noble and dignified, graceful and generous. "What nonsense are you talking about? This was such a choice. In such a situation, who would let anyone down? You didn't betray Rushi, and you didn't betray me. Don't think too much." Li Tianlan shook his head and said nothing. Dongqing Rushi took Li Tianlan's hand and led him to the ward. From childhood to adulthood, because we paid too much attention to this engagement, we may have instilled too many ideas in Rushi. She didn't have any rebellious mentality, but she also attached great importance to this engagement. "Tianlan, this is your luck, and also Rushi's luck. You will become husband and wife in the future, and you will be the most intimate person in your life. If I can draw my sword for you, I will be very happy." Men and women were husband and wife. When in danger, the man would stand in front of the woman. It was only right and proper. But since they were husband and wife, why couldn't the woman stand up when the man was temporarily powerless? It was very important for Rushi to step forward this time. "I heard about the sword in Eastern Europe. That sword can make you know who Rushi is in your heart, and it can also make Rushi know that you are in her heart. This chapter is not over. Please turn the page." Her identity. The door of the ward was pushed open. Bai Qingqian led Li Tianlan in. The layout of the ward was no less than that of a luxury suite, and the room was filled with a faint fragrance. Li Tianlan passed by the living room, stood in front of the door of the bedroom, and pushed open the bedroom door. The strong smell of herbs filled the ward. On the wide bed, the woman who had stood in front of him in Mormons and pulled out silence in the face of the elites of the Devil Troop and the Beihai Corps was lying quietly on the bed. Her body seemed to be lying there without any strength. Her face was pale, and she was motionless. She was beautiful and thin. Li Tianlan carefully walked over and held Dongqing Rushi's palm. The slender white hand was soft in his hand at this time, without any strength. Li Tianlan held Dongqing Rushi's cold palm and was silent for a long time. The doctor just checked. The next week is the key. Whether Rushi can survive or not depends on the next week. But the doctor is still very optimistic. Rushi has a strong desire to live, so he should be able to survive. That's not good. Should be able. Very optimistic. Feeling the state of Dongqing Rushi's body, Li Tianlan's mouth moved reluctantly. He thought of Qin Weibai's words. It seemed that he had never thought that Dongqing Rushi would die. Now that he thought about it, it turned out that being a vegetable was the most optimistic ending. Vegetable. Vegetable. The Wang family of Beihai. The Devil Troop. The Devil Troop. Li Tianlan's heart suddenly twitched. He stared at Dongqing Rushi's face and sniffed. Dongqing Rushi lay there quietly, motionless. Li Tianlan bent down, got close to Dongqing Rushi's ear, and whispered, "I'm fine." In the weak breath that chilled his heart, he gently bit her ear and said softly, "When you wake up, I'll marry you." In a trance, Dongqing Rushi's eyelashes moved. She seemed to move, but also seemed not to move. Li Tianlan didn't look at her, and he was not in the mood to look at her. He straightened up and walked straight out of the ward. Bai Qingqian stood at the door and looked at him, wanting to say something but stopping on second thought. Li Tianlan seemed to have completely calmed down. He smiled and whispered, "Auntie, I'm leaving." "Where do you want to go?" Bai Qingqian asked subconsciously. For some reason, she suddenly felt a little uneasy. Li Tianlan was too quiet, so quiet that she felt a little crazy. "I'm going to see the others." Li Tianlan's voice was extremely calm. "Tianlan." Bai Qingqian looked at Li Tianlan's eyes. "Promise me, don't be impulsive." "Of course." Li Tianlan smiled softly and calmly. "But there are some things that need to be explained." He nodded to Bai Qingqian, walked out of the ward calmly, went out of the corridor at a speed that was almost escaping, and entered the elevator. There was no one in the elevator. Li Tianlan's palm grasped the metal wall of the elevator tightly, and he gasped for breath. His eyes became calmer and calmer, but his 5 fingers pierced through the metal wall of the elevator. "This chapter is not over. Please turn the page." 5 dark finger holes were left on the wall. The elevator stopped in the first ward. Li Tianlan walked out of the hall and headed for the second ward. Lin Yuxian, who was also a little pale, hurried over. When he saw Li Tianlan, he breathed a sigh of relief. "I just received a call from my sister saying that you woke up. I guess you will come here. How is it? How is Rushi's situation?" Li Tianlan regained his calmness and looked at Lin Yuxian with a bright smile. He whispered, "The situation is very bad." Lin Yuxian was stunned for a moment. Li Tianlan's smile was so calm, which was completely opposite from the content of his words. The corner of his mouth moved, and he didn't know what to say for a moment. "Let's go." Li Tianlan passed by him. "To see Mr. Lin." Lin Yuxian frowned and followed him subconsciously. The temperature was rising. The breeze in the hospital shook the flowers and plants. Lin Yuxian hesitated for a long time before he whispered, "I was there at that time, but the devil troop rushed too fast, and Jiang Qiansong died instantly. Rushi not only saved you but also saved me. The Lin clan owes her a favor." He paused and laughed at himself. "No, I owe her a favor." Li Tianlan did not speak. "Tianlan, do you want to?" "Go ahead." Li Tianlan suddenly interrupted him. "What is the most spectacular place in the dark world?" Lin Yuxian was stunned. The most spectacular place in the dark world? He was still thinking, but Li Tianlan had continued. "I heard of a place when I was a child." He said softly, gently and calmly, "That's the story my grandfather told me. It's a stone platform built on the top of a mountain. In the middle of the stone platform, there is a stone that has faced the sky and the sea for hundreds of years. He said that there are many names engraved on that stone. The romance of the dark world for hundreds of years is almost all on that stone. That should be the most spectacular place in the dark world." Lin Yuxian's face gradually changed. "Have you ever been to Mount Dibbing and the stage of Formidable Person?" Li Tianlan suddenly asked. Lin Yuxian shook his head subconsciously. He had been to Mount Dibbing when he was a child, but he had never been to the stage of Formidable Person. It was a forbidden area of the Wang family of Beihai. It was occasionally open to entertain real distinguished guests and big shots. Mount Dibbing, the stage of Formidable Person. Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes and smiled. "I haven't been there either." He walked forward and was silent for a long time. Then he whispered, "I want to have a look." It was like a thunder rolling through the clear sky. Lin Yuxian looked at him with a dull face. He seemed to realize that what he said was inappropriate. So Li Tianlan calmly modified his wording. "I'm going to have a look." That kind of madness seemed to be venting in the calmest way. It was suppressed, but it was extremely ferocious. It was threatening. Li Tianlan kept moving forward. The noon sun illuminated the clear sky for thousands of miles. The light fell with high temperature and fell on Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan looked up at the sky. Under the sun, his figure was straight, like the sun. End of this chapter. Bookmark for easy reading. Chapter 6:15. At night in Yuzhou City, the hazy night shrouded the brightly lit city. An extremely depressing atmosphere seemed to be slowly pressing down with the deepening night, and the whole Yuzhou became a little restless. This afternoon and this night, countless eyes were focused on the private hospitals of Prince Yong's mansion and the giant group. The news that Li Tianlan had woken up had spread. Everyone wanted to know what Li Tianlan, who had experienced the chaos in Eastern Europe and played an important role, would do when faced with everything after waking up. When Li Tianlan returned to the prince's mansion, Qin Weibai had already made dinner in person. Several side dishes were relatively light, and the white porridge was just right. Li Tianlan ate and chatted with Qin Weibai as usual, cleaning up the dishes and chopsticks together. The news broadcast in the living room had come to an end. The last news was about the wounded of the Snow Dance Corps who would return to China for treatment in the near future. As for Marshal Li Tianlan of the Snow Dance Corps and the military merits of the Snow Dance Corps, at least for now, the news did not mention a word. Li Tianlan sat on the sofa, lit a cigarette, and watched TV quietly. He held Qin Weibai, who was lazily snuggling up to him, played with her hair and whispered, "What's going on with Mount Shu?" Qin Weibai was lazy and nasal, like a cat enjoying the warmth in the sun. "Wei Kunlun." Li Tianlan looked at Qin Weibai and said. Wei Kunlun had successfully broken through and become a new invincible realm expert in Jianghu state. Li Tianlan learned the news almost immediately. What followed was that the new invincible realm expert actually asked his 3 disciples to learn swordsmanship from him. Behind such an incredible move, there was no greater kindness. Li Tianlan communicated with Dongqing Wudi as soon as he heard the news. Dongqing Wudi said that the matter of Mount Shu had nothing to do with him. He also called Li Honghe, who was still in Lin N. Li Honghe frankly admitted that he could influence Yun Qinshi, the Phantom Swordmaster, but he was also confused about Wei Kunlun. As for the academics, Li Tianlan was just in a cooperative relationship with them. Even if the academics had a good card like Wei Kunlun in their hands, it was impossible for them to hand it over to him. Moreover, Mount Shu was located in the southwest with thousands of sword energy. In the martial arts and the dark realm in the southwest of Jianghu state, it could be called the unique king. The southwest was the headquarters of the Prince Group. In many cases, Mount Shu, especially Wei Kunlun's branch, had always been regarded as the power of the Prince Group. Now Wei Kunlun's elder brother, Wei Tianhang, was one of the deputy ministers of the army headquarters of Jianghu state and the real tycoon of the Prince Group. No one would believe that Mount Shu would become a pawn in the hands of the academics, the sworn enemy of the Prince Group. In this way, Wei Kunlun, whom he had never met, suddenly showed such great kindness to Li Tianlan. Excluding the new invincible realm expert's affection for Li Tianlan, the only driving force behind the scenes was the Samsara Palace. The look in Qin Weibai's eyes was somewhat complicated. He should have already gotten off the plane and is on his way here. When he arrives, let him talk to you. If this chapter is not finished, please turn the page. Li Tianlan took a deep look at him and nodded. Qin Weibai arched into Li Tianlan's arms, as if she wanted him to hold her more comfortably. She was silent for a while and asked carefully, "How is Rushi?" "She's not doing well." Li Tianlan's tone was so ordinary that even he himself felt it incredible. At present, being in a vegetative state is the best result. I had a talk with the experts in the afternoon. In theory, there is a possibility of recovery, but it will take a long time. Being in a vegetative state, Qin Weibai was thinking about the master of Samsara Palace's scheme. After countless replays of the final battle, she was more and more sure of the master of Samsara Palace's plan. From the beginning, the master of Samsara Palace did not pin all her hopes on Li Tianlan staying in Reki City. She hoped that Li Tianlan would stay there. But even if he appeared in Mormons, Dongqing Rushi could still be her bargaining chip. She just didn't know if she would predict Dongqing Rushi's ending, and whether she would feel distressed and guilty. Qin Weibai smiled self-deprecatingly. That woman. Maybe she didn't care about anyone or anything at all except Li Tianlan. It will get better. She looked up at him in Li Tianlan's arms and gently touched his face. Do you think I should regret it? Li Tianlan suddenly asked. He thought quietly. Some problems seem to be clear, but I don't seem to understand. For example, when the palace master stabbed me with a sword, if I didn't go to Mormons, Rushi wouldn't be like this now, and it turned out that I really didn't play any role in the final chaos. And if I didn't go, do you regret it? Qin Weibai interrupted him and asked. Li Tianlan was silent for a while. I don't know. He shook his head. Yes, when he almost lost Dongqing Rushi and was stabbed by the master of Samsara Palace, his answer was that he didn't know if he would regret it or not. Under the circumstances at that time, it was impossible for him not to go to Mormons. He had to go. That's it. Qin Weibai said softly, most of the time, no matter whether we change anything or not, the initial attitude is actually the most important. You don't know if you will regret it, but I can be sure that if you don't go to Mormons that night, Jianghu State will be disappointed with you, and you will be disappointed with yourself. Li Tianlan smiled bitterly. Maybe. The news broadcast ended. The weather forecast also came to an end. It would rain heavily tomorrow in Beihai province. Li Tianlan looked at the picture on the TV, narrowed his eyes and whispered, there are some things that must be explained. Little Bai, I'm going to Mount Dibbing to have a look at the stage of formidable person. 10 years within 10 years, you. This chapter is not over. Please turn the page. You can definitely overlook the entire Mount Dibbing. Qin Weibai's voice was resolute. I can't wait for 10 years. Li Tianlan laughed. Qin Weibai was stunned and whispered, within 5 years, there is a chance. You. When do you want to go? In Beihai province, the heavy rain would turn into a rainstorm tomorrow. Li Tianlan pointed to the screen and said calmly, tomorrow. No. Qin Weibai suddenly sat up from Li Tianlan's arms. Because she moved too fast, her forehead hit Li Tianlan's nose, and they both grunted at the same time. No. Qin Weibai rubbed her forehead with one hand and gently stroked Li Tianlan's nose with the other. Do you know what the stage of formidable person means to the Wang family of Beihai? That's the forbidden area of the Wang family of Beihai. It's the most sacred place in the entire Mount Dibbing, and its status is even higher than Wang Tianzong's bedchamber. Only the big shots who are really recognized by the Wang family of Beihai are lucky enough to climb Mount Dibbing, and they must be recognized by the Wang family of Beihai. From another perspective, only the kind of people who have common and huge interests with the Wang family of Beihai in some cooperation will be recognized by the Wang family of Beihai. In the past 10 years, only 3 people in the world who are not from the Wang family of Beihai are lucky enough to set foot on the stage of formidable person. Do you know who they are? Who are they? Li Tianlan asked softly. His finger pointed at Qin Weibai's white and tender forehead, and he was somewhat careless. One is Li Huaqing, the president of Jianghu State. The other is Paul, the patriarch of Rothschild. Qin Weibai said. Who's the third? Li Tianlan glanced at her. Qin Weibai hesitated and whispered, the third is Cold Winter Building, the boss of Jianghu State's Flourishing Age Fund. Li Tianlan was stunned. Before he realized what was going on, there was a knock on the door. Come in. Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows. A tall and plump European woman walked in from the door and said respectfully, Your Highness, boss. Li Tianlan looked at her and was in a trance for a moment. The one who appeared in front of him was Horsewoman, one of the surviving supermasters of Samsara Palace. Qin Weibai straightened up from Li Tianlan's arms and said lightly, What's wrong? Distinguished guests are here. Horsewoman whispered. Shall we let them in? Who? Li Tianlan asked. Horsewoman glanced at him quickly. President Li Huaqing and Secretary Wang Qinglei of Wuxia, Qin Weibai said. Oh, and did not speak, thinking that the actors were here. Li Tianlan patted Qin Weibai's buttocks casually and said with a chuckle, Go make a cup of tea and listen to what they have to say. End of this chapter. Bookmark for easy reading. Chapter 616. In front of the antique, expensive and luxurious hall, Li Tianlan stood there, watching Li Huaqing and Wang Qinglei coming over, and made a gesture of welcome with a calm expression. However, Li Huaqing, who had just returned to Jianghu state from Eastern Europe, looked at that excessively young face and had countless emotions in his heart. He hadn't seen Li Tianlan for only a week. But this week was the week when the new and the old changed. The final day passed, and the chaos came to an end. From the second he woke up, Li Tianlan's status had changed dramatically. Li Huaqing wasn't sure if Li Tianlan was aware of this. But facing this young man again, he was no longer relaxed. Now, this young man, who was only 22 years old, was already qualified to stand at the peak of the whole dark world after the older generation became silent one after another. After gaining the strong support of the giant group, he was now qualified to win anyone's respect. The distance between them was getting closer and closer. Li Tianlan took the initiative to take 2 steps forward unhurriedly. Mr. President. He took the initiative to salute and shook hands with Li Huaqing. Li Huaqing's expression was gentle and calm. He patted Li Tianlan's palm and said with a smile, "How's your injury? I heard that you were seriously injured and in a coma in Mormons. Not only me, but many comrades, including Qinglei, are very worried. After all, you are the hope to protect Jianghu state in the future." "I'm fine now. Some rumors have been exaggerated." Li Tianlan shook his head and glanced at Wang Qinglei. There was only indifference in his expression and eyes. "Secretary Wang. That's good, that's good." Wang Qinglei smiled. This big shot of the Wang family of Beihai. As the leader of the Southeast Group, he had become the most eye-catching political figure in Jianghu state in recent years. He was also the key to the delicate atmosphere within the Wang family of Beihai. Everyone knew his goal, and everyone was watching how he would go on. At this time tonight, he followed Li Huaqing to Prince Yong's mansion to visit Li Tianlan, which had already caused countless discussions and speculations. Li Tianlan was also speculating in his heart. But at least on the surface, Wang Qinglei did not reveal the slightest different emotion. His eyes and smile were extremely sincere, filled with gratification and joy, impeccable. Li Tianlan nodded and reached out his hand, saying, "Please." Qin Weibai had already made tea in the living room. Amidst the faint fragrance of tea, she stood up and greeted Li Huaqing with a smile. She was graceful, elegant, quiet, and gentle. The once high and mighty goddess seemed to have become a quiet and well-behaved wife in a trance, and her demeanor became more and more dazzling. Li Huaqing sat on the sofa and sipped his tea, thinking about what to say. Li Tianlan looked at him calmly. In fact, he had always been a person who didn't know much about the ways of the world. Before he entered the human world, the camp in the primeval forest and the prison in the desert did not pay attention to this. After he entered the human world, there was a decisive battle, and there was no need for this kind of 3 years of traveling. The chaos in Eastern Europe was more like a life-and-death plunder and conquest. For the time being, he couldn't learn that kind of deception and hiding a knife in a smile, nor was he interested in it. Therefore, he didn't mind the awkward silence at all. He just looked at Li Huaqing quietly to see what he could say. "Tianlan, here's the thing. There are still many repercussions of what happened in Eastern Europe. Internally, our comrades also have many different opinions, and many people want to hear your attitude. At the beginning of tomorrow, the decision-making committee will hold a plenary meeting. I'm here to invite you to attend tomorrow. This meeting can be regarded as your work report after returning home. How about it?" Li Huaqing took the initiative to speak with a smile. "Tomorrow." Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows. "What time tomorrow?" 8 o'clock in the morning. Li Huaqing glanced at him. "This chapter is not over. Please turn the page." He laughed and said, "Why?" "Tianlan, do you have other things to do tomorrow? It will take the Snowdance Corps 2 days to withdraw from Eastern Europe." "I can do it in the morning." Li Tianlan glanced at Wang Qinglei calmly and said lightly, "It's just that I experienced something in Eastern Europe. There are some things that I want an explanation for." He looked into Wang Qinglei's eyes and said calmly, "Secretary Wang, I want to go to the stage of formidable person to have a look." "What do you think?" The stage of formidable person. Even Li Huaqing's face couldn't help changing when he heard this. Wang Qinglei raised his head in astonishment and looked at Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan's eyes were calm and serious. The smile on Wang Qinglei's face disappeared little by little. He seemed to feel a little ridiculous, and his tone was full of absurdity and strange sarcasm. Do you want to go to the stage of formidable person? More than that. Li Tianlan said. I want to go. I'm sorry. Wang Qinglei's eyes seemed to become cold for a moment. The stage of formidable person is a forbidden place in Beihai province. It is not a place that can welcome your highness's victory. I can make the decision on this matter, and I can tell you clearly that your highness is not welcome at the stage of formidable person. I heard that. Li Tianlan nodded. He stood up and looked at Wang Qinglei condescendingly. But you seem to have forgotten a problem. His tone was gentle and calm. Do you think anyone can stop me now where I want to go? Tianlan. Li Huaqing frowned. Wang Qinglei took a deep look at him. He said softly, I know there are many misunderstandings between the Wang family of Beihai and your highness, but many things can be solved. Everyone is in Jianghu state. At this time, the situation is delicate. I hope your highness can focus on the overall situation. Don't. He had not finished his words. Li Tianlan suddenly stretched out his hand. The entire space of the mansion shook as he stretched out his hand. Wang Qinglei's body flew up directly and fell into Li Tianlan's hand. Li Tianlan grabbed his neck tightly and lifted him up. In an instant, his eyes were gloomy and scarlet, as if he had completely lost his mind. Focus on the overall situation. His voice was as cold as the chilly wind blowing from the abyss of hell, tyrannical and presumptuous. When the devil troop united with Rothschild to kill me, why didn't anyone say that? When Wang Tianzong sent the devil troop to attack the manor, why didn't anyone say that? If the Wang family of Beihai could really focus on the overall situation, would my fiancé be lying in the hospital now? Now I'm still alive, and I want to go to the stage of formidable person. You tell me to focus on the overall situation? Wang Qinglei. You tell me, what is the overall situation? Bang! The fist with great power directly hit Wang Qinglei's abdomen. The overall situation you mentioned, whose overall situation are you talking about? Wang Qinglei spat out blood, and his body slid along the floor for nearly 20 meters. The ferocious and tyrannical killing intent swept through the hall. Li Tianlan took a step forward. Behind him, Qin Weibai's arms came over and hugged him tightly. Li Huaqing's serious and somewhat gloomy face appeared in front of him. Tianlan, do you know what you're doing? Li Tianlan took a deep look at him. The killing intent was disappearing. All the emotions were suppressed in his heart in an instant. Of course. He laughed. Sorry, I was a little emotional just now. But since Secretary Wang is a person who cares about the overall situation, I guess you won't mind what just happened, right? He tilted his head and looked at Wang Qinglei, who was struggling to get up from the ground. This chapter is not over. Please turn the page. He said with no expression, Secretary Wang, the overall situation is the most important thing. Li Huaqing glared at Li Tianlan, but he was obviously not really angry. In the rapid footsteps, the tall and plump figure of horsewoman appeared at the door again. Your Highness. She glanced at the situation in the living room and said calmly, Mr. Wei Kunlun, the Nirvana sword master of Mount Shu, is here to visit. Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes. Both Li Huaqing and Wang Qinglei were slightly stunned. It was no secret that Wei Kunlun, the new invincible realm expert of Jianghu state, wanted his 3 personal disciples, who he valued very much, to learn swordsmanship from Li Tianlan. But no one thought that Wei Kunlun would come so soon. Li Tianlan thought about it, looked at Li Huaqing, nodded and said, Mr. President, excuse me. Li Huaqing nodded, looked at Li Tianlan's back, and then looked at Wang Qinglei, whose face was pale. The two followed Li Tianlan out at the same time. Li Tianlan walked quickly through the mansion. When he approached the gate of the mansion, Wei Kunlun had already walked in with 3 disciples. This was the first time that Li Tianlan had seen the famous Nirvana swordmaster in Jianghu state. He used to be one of the strongest superiors of the half-step invincible realm in the Dark World, but he had always been outside the general trend. He was not in the final battle of Heaven Capital, nor in the chaos of Eastern Europe. Even in the past 3 years, when the Dark World was full of flames of war, the sword energy of Mount Shu had never left the southwest. Everyone thought that he was in closed-door training to find a way to break through the invincible realm. But no one expected that after he entered the invincible realm, The first thing he did was to visit Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan looked at Wei Kunlun in front of him seriously. Wei Kunlun was not old, between young and middle-aged, about 40 years old. His appearance and figure were not very outstanding, but his every move, subtle but vivid sword energy could be said to be everywhere. Li Tianlan frowned. He instinctively felt that the other party's sword energy was a little familiar, but he didn't know where he had felt it. Your Highness, you have heard about my purpose of coming here. My 3 useless disciples, if your Highness works hard, they may be able to take charge in the future. We are all acquaintances, so I don't have to beat around the bush. Let my 3 disciples join the East Emperor Palace and learn swordsmanship from your Highness. How about that? Li Tianlan glanced at the 3 people behind Wei Kunlun. 2 men and 1 woman. The female disciple was naturally Yi Huayu, the only one Li Tianlan was familiar with. As for the other 2, he had never seen them before. 3 people join the East Emperor Palace? Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows, a little surprised. Your Highness, do you think it's too little? Wei Kunlun laughed loudly and said calmly and gently, from now on, the entire Mount Shu will join the East Emperor Palace. What do you think, your Highness? He paused, looked at Li Tianlan, and said with a smile, including me. Li Tianlan's heart suddenly jumped. This pie fell from the sky so suddenly that he was a little vigilant. He gradually raised his eyebrows, looked at Wei Kunlun and said calmly, Your Highness, what do you mean? It's boring. Wei Kunlun looked at Li Tianlan. We are on the same side. He stood in front of Li Tianlan and bowed slightly. His voice with sword energy instantly shrouded the whole mansion, clear as thunder. Wei Kunlun, the saint of the Samsara Palace. Wei Kunlun, the saint. Saint. Wei Kunlun. Wei Kunlun. Kunlun, in the incessant voice, he lowered his body and said calmly, Greetings, your Highness. End of this chapter. Bookmark for easier reading. Chapter 6:17. Samsara Palace, Saint. Mount Shu. Nirvana Sword Master. Wei Kunlun. This was the calmest attitude, enough to dispel everyone's doubts and speculations. Such a calm attitude was also like the most surging wave, fiercely washing the minds of countless people in Yuzhou. Saint was Wei Kunlun. In other words, from the moment Saint first appeared in the Dark World, Mount Shu had already belonged to the Samsara Palace, and it was even the most important part of the Samsara Palace. Among the countless elites of the Samsara Palace, there might be swordsmen from Mount Shu. Everyone thought that Wei Kunlun imprisoned himself in Mount Shu in order to break through the invincible realm, but the truth was extremely ironic. Mount Shu had never been silent. The swords of Mount Shu had always been active in the highest place of the Dark World, but in another identity. With the official demise of Samsara Palace, a large number of secrets did not disappear completely. Instead, they were being revealed bit by bit under the sky of the new era. Saint. Wei Kunlun. Who could have thought of this? Who could have thought of the consequences when Mount Shu stood firmly behind Li Tianlan? Wang Qinglei, who followed Li Tianlan out, stiffened for a moment. The corners of his mouth twitched, and he laughed at himself. In the past many years, with the collapse of the Li family, the Wang family of Beihai and Kunlun City had been firmly controlling the dark realm of Jianghu State, not allowing any dark force to take root in Jianghu State. What was the result? Mount Shu had always been a force of Samsara Palace. And in the vast Jianghu State, in addition to Mount Shu, who were the other forces of Samsara Palace? There was Li Honghe in Lin'an. The old fox, who was best at planning and liked to set up the overall situation, had been quietly hiding in Jianghu State for more than 20 years. What tricks did he have? Wang Qinglei took a deep breath. Somehow, there seemed to be an unstoppable force rising, unstoppable. Li Tianlan helped Wei Kunlun up. Amidst the shock, the #1 expert of Shushan was calm as usual. There was a smile in his eyes, and there was even a tinge of gratitude that could not be detected. From today on, I am Saint, and also Wei Kunlun. If your Highness needs anything, just tell me. Mount Shu will do its best. Wei Kunlun's voice was calm and powerful. So it's you. The look in Li Tianlan's eyes was complicated. The combination of Saint and Wei Kunlun made him feel that everything was extremely illusory. Did you reveal your identity at this time because you broke through the invincible realm? It's the Palace Master's will. Wei Kunlun said, "It's also the palace master's idea that Mount Shu joins the East Emperor Palace." Li Tianlan was silent for a while and said calmly, "But the palace master left." "Yeah, let's go." Wei Kunlun looked at Li Tianlan quietly, and a different emotion flashed through his eyes. Li Tianlan shook his head hard, reached out and said, "Let's talk inside." In the direction he pointed, Li Huaqing and Wang Qinglei slowly walked over. "Mr. President?" Wei Kunlun raised his eyebrows and glanced at Wang Qinglei. He asked in confusion, "What are you guys doing?" "It's nothing." Li Huaqing smiled and shook hands with Wei Kunlun. "Tianlan just woke up. I came to see him on behalf of my comrades. Since there's nothing else, I should go back." He looked at Li Tianlan and said, "There's a meeting tomorrow morning. Someone will send the contents of the meeting over later. Don't be late." Li Tianlan nodded and said yes. Li Huaqing walked to the door. Wang Qinglei followed behind. He hesitated for a moment, then turned around. Li Tianlan looked at him with gloomy eyes. It had only been a few minutes since the conflict between the two, but Li Tianlan had Mount Shu. Obviously, he had a different power from before. He wanted to hear what Wang Qinglei would say. Still the same sentence. Wang Qinglei's voice was a little hoarse and weak. "Your Highness, please focus on the overall situation." Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes and said expressionlessly, "Get out." Wang Qinglei raised his head and took a deep look at him. Then he slowly turned around and left. With his identity, he was humiliated. Instead of exploding, an inexplicable joy and smile flashed in his eyes at the moment he turned around. Li Tianlan looked at his back and didn't speak for a long time. Wei Kunlun stood beside him and watched all this. After a long time he whispered, "Your Highness, Mr. President's attitude needs to be carefully considered. It's a cooperation to begin with. How can there be so much intimacy?" Li Tianlan said quietly. "You saw it?" Wei Kunlun glanced at him. "It's a good show." Li Tianlan shook his head and turned to walk toward his residence. Wang Qinglei performed well, but I didn't do anything when I punched him. Wei Kunlun laughed in a low voice. He didn't worry that Li Tianlan couldn't figure it out. It would be a problem sooner or later. However, Li Tianlan's current attitude clearly showed that he was very clear-headed and didn't get carried away by what happened to Dongqing Rushi. "He's provoking me," Li Tianlan said blandly. "The person who doesn't know the overall situation wants me to focus on the overall situation. He just wants me to break the current situation. I'll go to the stage of formidable person." Today, he said that I should focus on the overall situation, which almost blocked my way out. Of course, I don't need any way out. In the current situation, I can go wherever I want. Wang Qinglei is also a person who doesn't care about the overall situation and stability. Wei Kunlun made a simple comment. Li Tianlan didn't speak. He couldn't determine Wang Tianzong's current specific state. But he could be sure that under the eternal sword light, even if Wang Tianzong had immortality, he would certainly not be better. He didn't die, and Li Guangtu didn't die, which also showed this. Such a situation was rare for Wang Qinglei. He wanted to seize power and control the Wang family of Beihai. In the case of Wang Tianzong's serious injury, the best way was to suppress his prestige and influence in the Wang family of Beihai. At present, nothing could suppress Wang Tianzong's prestige more than Li Tianlan stepping on the stage of formidable person. So Wang Qinglei said that he should focus on the overall situation, which was completely to provoke him to go to Mount Dibing. Li Tianlan didn't care about all this. Whether Wang Qinglei appeared or not tonight, it wouldn't affect his decision. Through the thousands of lights in Yuzhou, he couldn't see Beihai or the mountain in Beihai. But he would go there. He must go there. In the most above-board way. However, although this person doesn't care about the overall situation, his means have always been very clever. "Your Highness, if you want to go to Mount Dibing, how about I go with you?" Wei Kunlun continued. "No need." Li Tianlan shook his head. "They're just a group of clowns." The chaos in Eastern Europe, the eternal sword, Wang Tianzong. It seems that these things still can't make them understand a truth. Wei Kunlun looked at Li Tianlan. "What truth?" "The real power can fight against the whole world alone with one sword," Li Tianlan said. His voice was very light, but with a kind of vague spirit that could look down on the world. Wei Kunlun was silent for a while and looked at the 3 disciples behind him. They can learn swordsmanship from your highness. It may be the honor of the whole Mount Shu in the future. Li Tianlan turned to look at Wei Kunlun. Your highness, do you really want to join the East Emperor Palace? He asked very seriously. I'm not your highness, Wei Kunlun said with a smile. You are. As for the name of the East Emperor Palace, your highness should consider changing it. Li Tianlan said yes. Chapter 6:18. It was already September in Yuzhou. The early morning sun was already tinged with a hint of autumn. The maple leaves in the hidden Dragon Sea gradually changed color. The car passed through the clean and tidy road in the hidden Dragon Sea. Li Tianlan looked at the sky outside the window, his eyes as deep as endless clouds. This was not his first time coming to the hidden Dragon Sea. However, this was his first time attending a meeting in the hidden Dragon Sea. There was no Dongqing Wudi, no Wei Kunlun, no one around him. It had been almost 4 years since he had entered the world, and he alone was qualified to step into that meeting room. The car moved forward slowly. The morning breeze blew past, and the surface of the hidden ocean rippled. Last night, the contents of the meeting had been formed into a document and transmitted to Prince Yong's mansion, as well as the hands of every member of parliament. In fact, the work direction of Jianghu State in September had been determined at yesterday's meeting. Today's meeting, strictly speaking, was only about one thing: summarizing Jianghu State's gains and losses in Eastern Europe this time. Li Tianlan casually flipped through the information in his hand, thinking about the rumors that were not really rumors, and was lost in thought. Your Highness, we've arrived. The young but calm driver stopped the car and reminded them. Li Tianlan looked up. In his line of sight was an ancient-looking but extremely dignified hall. The national emblem and the red star flag fluttered solemnly in the wind. Li Tianlan looked at this scene with a strange look in his eyes. At this moment, no one knew what he was thinking. People were coming and going in front of the main hall. Members of parliament who held great power in Jianghu State appeared here one after another. The secretary and the chauffeur were busy. Sitting in the car, Li Tianlan smoked a cigarette and casually threw the butt out. Patting the driver's seat, he whispered, "Go back. Don't wait for me. I'll go back myself." The driver hesitated for a moment, nodded, reversed the car, and left the hidden Dragon Sea. Li Tianlan stood under a maple tree and looked at the blue sky above his head. The warm autumn sun cast spots of light on the treetops. The light and shadows fell on him, making him look like a statue. Li Tianlan looked at it and was silent for a long time. "What is your highness thinking about?" A warm and indifferent voice suddenly sounded. Li Tianlan turned his head and took a look. In his line of sight, a middle-aged man wearing the same military uniform as him with the rank of a marshal was standing beside him, smiling calmly. Deputy Minister of the Army Headquarters of Jianghu State, Chief of the General Staff. Jianghu God of Army Yi Dongxing. General Yi. Li Tianlan smiled and reached out to shake hands with him naturally. He still remembered that it was this god of army of Jianghu State who appeared in the Li family's camp. The year he left, he also set foot on the road to Huiting. Yes, back then. Yi Dongxing's eyes flashed. He held Li Tianlan's hand tightly. "I'm thinking." He patted Yi Dongxing's shoulder with the other hand and pointed to the sky. "Look at the sky. Isn't it different from before?" The corner of Yi Dongxing's eyes twitched. He narrowed his eyes and said calmly, "Your Highness seems to be implying something?" "No." Li Tianlan handed Yi Dongxing a cigarette with a smile and said softly, "I'm just saying that today is a good day." "It really is a good day." Yi Dongxing took the cigarette and smiled. "Your Highness, please." Li Tianlan shook his head. "I'm waiting for someone. After you, Marshal Yi." Yi Dongxing nodded and looked at him deeply. "All right. See you later." Li Tianlan replied with a hum. In his sight, a black Audi with a northeast license plate slowly drove over. Li Tianlan casually waved his hand and motioned for the driver to stop. The car stopped in front of Li Tianlan. The door of the back row opened, and a beautiful woman with a graceful appearance but a sharp and dangerous aura got out. "This chapter is not over. Please turn the page." In the car, she looked at Li Tianlan in surprise. "Young Governor, you?" Li Tianlan looked at her and thought for a while. Deep Dream. Yes. Deep Dream nodded and smiled. Long time no see. I thought you forgot me. How come? Li Tianlan looked at the back row of the car, and then looked at the top assassin of Sai City who had fought with him 3 years ago. What are you doing? Governor, it's not convenient for you to act now. The minister is unconscious. Only I came to attend the meeting on behalf of the Northeast Special Warfare Headquarters. Governor said that this meeting is very important to you. She originally wanted to come in person, but her injury recurred, so... Deep Dream wanted to say something but stopped on second thought. Governor, how is your injury? Li Tianlan asked subconsciously. After that, he had a video call with Situ Tsongyue, and he also saw Tribulation, who was accidentally rescued from Eastern Europe by General Nan, the deputy commander of the Navy of Jianghu State. Tribulation's injury was extremely serious. His foundation was completely destroyed, and he was still in a coma. Naturally, the Vatican had to take responsibility for this. Situ Tsongyue's injury was also not optimistic, and it even threatened her future combat capability. The chaos in Eastern Europe was too fierce. The invincible realm experts were either killed or injured. Those who survived by chance were destined to need a long time to recover. It's not very optimistic. She needs to recuperate. According to our deduction, for at least a few years, she can't even have intense exercise, let alone fight. Deep Dream shook her head and said apologetically, "That's why I'm here this time. But I'm neither the governor nor the minister. I only have the right to speak at today's meeting. I don't think I can help you much." Li Tianlan looked at her in silence and whispered, "Go back." Deep Dream looked at Li Tianlan and seemed to be unable to react. "You're wrong. Governor, you're wrong too," Li Tianlan whispered. He turned to look at the door of the conference room, where people were coming and going, and chuckled. "I don't need any help now, so go back." "But..." Deep Dream wanted to say something but stopped on second thought. "No buts." Li Tianlan waved his hand and said in an unquestionable tone, "But it's rare for you to come to Yuzhou. You can go to Prince Yong's mansion first. Little Bai and His Highness Wei Kunlun are both there. If you have any bottlenecks in martial arts, you can learn from the swordsmanship of Mount Shu. Go back. This is an order." Deep Dream bit her lip and whispered, "Today's meeting." "I know." Li Tianlan said lightly, "I know what some people want to say, but I'm not here to attend the meeting today." He pushed Deep Dream into the car, closed the door and said to the driver, "Go back to Prince Yong's mansion." He glanced at Deep Dream and said, "In a few days, everything will be explained." The Audi was slowly turning around. Li Tianlan watched it quietly. That day was the first time he came to the Hidden Dragon Sea to attend the high-level meeting of the decision-making committee. He transferred the driver away and sent Deep Dream away. He also stopped Wei Kunlun, the new invincible realm expert of Jianghu State and the minister of the Southwest Special Warfare Headquarters, who wanted to attend the meeting with him today. Today he was alone. Looking at the conference room in front of him, he stamped out the cigarette butt and walked over slowly. "Tianlan." "Ah no, now I should call you Marshal Li, or Your Highness." "Huh." An old but vigorous voice sounded in front of the conference room door, sounding extremely hearty. Wu Zhengmin, the Deputy Prime Minister of Jianghu State, walked down the steps in person. Li Tianlan hurriedly took a few steps forward, held Wu Zhengmin's warm palm, and said with a wry smile, "Grandpa Wu, you still call me Tianlan, which makes me feel comfortable." Li Tianlan had nothing but respect for Wu Zhengmin, who had defended Jianghu with unparalleled political wisdom despite the collapse of the Li family for many years. Wu Zhengmin laughed and patted Li Tianlan on the shoulder. "Tianlan, you're good. You're very good. This chapter is not over. Please turn the page." Li Tianlan shook his head with a wry smile. Wu Zhengmin had already waved in another direction. "White, Mulin, what are you doing there? Come and have a chat." His voice was loud and clear, and he was full of energy. He talked and laughed cheerfully and freely. Many people nearby looked over, whether intentionally or unintentionally. On the other side, Bai Zhanfeng, who could almost be called the local emperor in Yuzhou, shook his head and walked over. Zhou Mulin, the real magnate of Jianghu State, also wanted to come over, but the secretary walked over and said something in his ear. He smiled and cupped his hands to this side, nodded to Li Tianlan, and walked in another direction. "Old guy, What are you shouting for? I heard your loud voice as soon as I came. It's outrageous. Bai Zhanfeng came over and said in a helpless tone. Wu Zhengmin snorted coldly and said indifferently, some people are just outrageous. Making a racket? I've already given him face by not slapping him in the face. What's he doing by taking advantage of his seniority? Taking advantage of your seniority? Bai Zhanfeng glanced at him with a faint smile. Wu Zhengmin froze for a moment and chuckled. Indeed, among all the people in the senior management of Jianghu State, he and Bai Zhanfeng were the oldest. One was the first and the other was the second. I'm not talking about us. That old guy is a few years older than us. Wu Zhengmin said, the Southeast has brought up that old guy to target Tianlan. White, you must show your attitude today. Bai Zhanfeng glanced at Li Tianlan, nodded, and was about to speak. Li Tianlan suddenly said, against me? Yes. Bai Zhanfeng nodded and said, there are several old comrades present at this meeting. They are all veterans. Because they have retired, they have no scruples about what they say and what they do. The Southeast invited an old guy to come out in order to target your achievements in Eastern Europe and suppress your credit. But don't worry, old Wu and I can handle it. I'm not worried. Li Tianlan smiled and said softly, I'm ready to face everything since I can stand here today. Grandpa Wu, Grandpa Bai. He looked at the two old men in front of him and said, thank you for today, but no need. His gaze was firm and indifferent. Today this is my battlefield. You just have to watch. In fact, I have been thinking about this day for many years. The Li family fell from here. Today, I will lift the Li family up again. By yourself. Bai Zhanfeng raised his eyebrows, and his eyes were complicated. By myself. Li Tianlan nodded. Enough. He nodded to the two old men and walked to the door of the conference room. Are you Li Tianlan? An old but extremely sharp voice suddenly sounded in Li Tianlan's ear. Li Tianlan turned his head and raised his eyebrows. In his sight was an extremely thin old man, dressed in an old Chinese tunic suit and holding a cane. He was almost skinny, but his eyes were extremely sharp as a knife. Li Tianlan nodded and said gently, I am. Humph. The old man snorted coldly. I really don't know what Comrade Hua Chang is thinking. Does a young boy deserve to attend the high-level meeting of Jianghu State? It's nonsense. The old man raised his cane and almost pointed it at Li Tianlan's face. Look at you. Ask yourself, do you deserve the rank of marshal? Do you deserve it? The old man's voice was sharp and loud. In an instant, almost everyone's eyes were focused on him and Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan smiled softly, still gentle and calm. But in this calmness, Bai Zhanfeng and Wu Zhengmin clearly saw the fighting spirit and madness in his eyes. Who can tell me? Li Tianlan looked around and smiled slowly. He pointed at the old man in front of him and asked, what is this old man? End of this chapter. Bookmark for easy reading. Chapter 6:19. An unprecedented atmosphere pervaded in front of the conference room. Li Tianlan's voice was very light and gentle, but his voice fell clearly in everyone's ears. It sounded elegant, but extremely ferocious. Old bastard. What was it? In the solemn hidden Dragon Sea, it was not uncommon for giants to argue or even quarrel. But such sharp words still stimulated the nerves of all high-level officials in Jianghu State. Many people couldn't even remember how many years it had been since they heard such words. The old man's face suddenly turned red, and a pair of eyeballs in his shriveled eye sockets almost popped out, looking extremely ferocious. The crutch in his hand was still pointed at Li Tianlan, and his voice was grumpy. Say it again? Li Tianlan didn't even look at him. There was a faint smile on his calm face, but the madness was burning in his heart like a wildfire. The dangerous temperature filled the conference room of Hidden Dragon Sea, almost everywhere. Many people had seen Li Tianlan. However, not many people understood him. But even so, at this moment, seeing Li Tianlan smile, everyone still felt a strong sense of alienation. They didn't know this young man who might be on an equal footing with them after today. But they were keenly aware that he was different from before. He was completely different. Is no one going to introduce me? Li Tianlan's voice was with a smile. A nobody offended the marshal of Jianghu State. Do you really think that I dare not kill you? Crack. A subtle sword intent suddenly appeared at the front of the crutch. The wooden crutch suddenly shattered. The sword energy condensed. Before it was about to envelop the old man, a hand gently supported the old man and took him a step back. Bang! In the dull sound, the floor where the old man had been standing was completely shattered. The invisible sword energy spread to the left and right for nearly 20 meters at a moderate speed, all the way to the conference room. The expensive floor was broken and looked very ugly. Everyone was stunned. The fastest computer. No one thought that Li Tianlan would really do it. There was no doubt that if the old man had stepped back a second later, his body would have been cut into countless pieces by this sword intent. Since the founding of Jianghu state, this place might have been stained with blood, but no one died. This was something that had never happened before. Everyone was looking at Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan's expression was calm and lazy, and the faint smile on his face became more and more indifferent. But behind the indifference, the trace of madness began to become more and more obvious. Your Highness, why are you so angry? Yi Dongsheng stood beside the old man and looked at Li Tianlan. There was no helplessness on his face, no wry smile, no anger, only seriousness. Most of the time, seriousness meant fear. In terms of force, he was no match for Li Tianlan. But that didn't mean Yi Dongsheng was afraid of him. But now, standing in front of Li Tianlan, Yi Dongsheng really felt the danger. Li Tianlan was as calm as a madman. Li Tianlan stared at Yi Dongsheng quietly. After a long time, he touched his nose and smiled. Marshal Yi, can you introduce me? This is my teacher. Yi Dongsheng said seriously, Old Marshal Tang Wanson of Jianghu State. Li Tianlan tilted his head, looked at the old man and said, Oh. He was no stranger to the name Tang Wanson. The Tang family was originally a big family in Yuzhou. Although it was not as good as the Bai family, it was an important part of the Southeast Group in building the network of Yuzhou. Tang Wanson was a member of Jianghu State more than 20 years ago and the deputy minister of the army headquarters. His position was roughly the same as Yi Dongsheng's today. He had a hot temper and even contradicted Li Honghe in public. That was when the Li family and the Wang family of Beihai were close. In his era, he could indeed be regarded as a big shot whose words carried weight. Li Tianlan smiled. An old guy who has retired for more than a decade. Where on earth does he get the courage to question whether I deserve the rank of marshal? His eyes moved from Tang Wanson to Yi Dongsheng. I'll keep this in mind. At that moment, countless surging malice and killing intent in the air hit Yi Dongsheng in the face without disguise. Yi Dongsheng could hardly breathe. Li Tianlan turned around and nodded to several members of parliament beside him, then walked into the conference room. There were also members of parliament chatting in the conference room. Member Zhong Yongming of Huiting was whispering something to a deputy prime minister of the cabinet. When he saw Li Tianlan come in, he narrowed his eyes and looked a little cold. It had been several years since the incident, but he still remembered the miserable appearance of his son when he died in the hospital. Li Tianlan glanced at him casually, found a corner to sit down, and did not speak. Bai Zhanfeng and Wu Zhengmin walked in. The two glanced at Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan shook his head, and his eyes were firm. The two old men who had been truly all-powerful in Jianghu State all their lives sat down side by side without batting an eyelid. More and more people walked into the conference room. The secretary came in and filled the cups of tea for the members of parliament present. A sweet-looking female secretary, less than 30 years old, had been looking at Li Tianlan curiously. She did not come to her senses until the tea overflowed and flowed out of the teacup. She was slightly shocked and was about to apologize in a panic, but Li Tianlan's palm had quietly brushed over the table. Update fastest mobile. // The flowing tea froze, the sparks flashed for a moment, and everything disappeared without a trace. Li Tianlan smiled and waved at the secretary, then casually glanced at the clock on the wall. It was 9 o'clock in the morning. President Li Huaqing of Jianghu State walked into the conference room. Everyone got up at the same time. Li Huaqing walked to the center and sat down. He nodded and said, Everyone sit down. Li Tianlan sat down silently, looked at the empty seat opposite Li Huaqing, and remained silent. Li Huaqing picked up the teacup, took a sip of tea, and waved his hand to signal the secretary to leave. After everyone went out, he put down the teacup and said calmly, Everyone has seen the agenda of the meeting in advance. The chaos in Eastern Europe seems to be over. But in fact, there is only less war. The general trend has been settled, but it has not been completely calmed down. Snow Country, the 5 countries in Eastern Europe, there are many things to deal with. If you have any ideas, you can speak freely. The conference room was quiet for a moment. Li Tianlan silently picked up the teacup. Li Huaqing looked at everyone's expression in his sight. He waited for a while, and seeing that no one spoke, he took the initiative to say, Tianlan, how is the situation in the 5 countries in Eastern Europe? Everything is under control. Li Tianlan put down the teacup. Everyone's eyes were focused on him. 22 years old. Sitting in the conference room of the power center of Jianghu State for the first time, he was extremely calm. At present, the interest groups in Eastern Europe have an urgent desire to cooperate with Jianghu State. After the agreement with Wulan State is signed, I will urge Wulan State to fulfill the agreement as soon as possible. At present, time is relatively short, and I haven't mastered all the details for the time being. When Wulan State sorts out the detailed information, I will report to Mr. President alone. Li Huaqing nodded and said, Marshal Li, since you haven't mastered all the details, why do you say that everything is under control? A voice suddenly sounded, gentle and tough. Not far from Li Tianlan, a gray-haired old man turned his head and looked at Li Tianlan with his bright and piercing eyes with great pressure. Are you really sure that everything in the 5 countries in Eastern Europe is under your control? No one spoke. Unlike Tang Wansen, although this old comrade in front of him was also a retired old comrade, his words and deeds carried absolute weight. Marshal Qi Baitsong, the former executive minister of the army headquarters of Jianghu State. This was the top leader of the Special Warfare Group. In the world where he had just retired for more than 2 years, Dongqing Wudi had not completely eliminated his influence in the army headquarters. Qi Baitsong, Tang Wansen. There was also Lu Yu, another former military big shot in Jianghu State. These 3 came from the Southeast Group, the Special Warfare Group, and the Prince Group respectively. They were also the 3 old comrades invited to the meeting today. From this alone, it could be seen that the academics were weak in the military and special warfare fields. Today, when discussing the situation of the Dark World in Eastern Europe, the academics could not choose any old comrades who could speak. Li Tianlan quietly glanced at Qi Baitsong. He reached out and tapped on the table. I'm sure. At present, although I can't grasp the details of the 5 countries in Eastern Europe, there will be no variables on a large scale. I can control the 5 countries in Eastern Europe, especially Wulan State. As long as I can control Prime Minister Rieker, that's enough. His voice was indifferent and confident. Prime Minister Rieker. Li Huaqing sighed softly. During my visit to Wulan State this time, Prime Minister Rieker's ruling ideas are very friendly and sincere to Jianghu State. Li Tianlan glanced at him and said nothing. Li Huaqing was equivalent to guaranteeing for him and confirming that he could control Rieker. From the moment he came in, Li Tianlan noticed that although Li Huaqing was full of smiles, the look deep in his eyes was a little gloomy. The time for the rise of the academics was too short. If they wanted to break out and officially enter the ranks of the top groups in Jianghu State, it depended on Li Huaqing's achievements in the next few years. The chaos in Eastern Europe was such a big cake, and Snow Country's position was unclear. The academics could only put their hopes on the 5 countries in Eastern Europe. How much they could get depended on Li Tianlan's attitude. So even if Li Tianlan's relationship with the academics was subtle after he entered the giant group, at least in a short time, the 2 sides were still in a honeymoon period. Qi Baitsong glanced at Li Huaqing, picked up the teacup, took a sip of tea, and stopped talking. Tianlan, you represent Jianghu State in Eastern Europe this time. Comrades don't know as much as you do. If you have any ideas, just say them. We can discuss them together. In the absence of Dongqing Wudi, Zhou Mulan, the only giant of the giant group, said this calmly. Li Tianlan's eyes flickered, and he quietly glanced at everyone in the conference room. The giants and members of parliament in the conference room were also looking at him. There was appreciation, playfulness, mockery, and malice in their eyes. Li Tianlan smiled. The wildfire hidden in his heart was gradually ignited. I do have an idea. Li Tianlan looked at Li Huaqing calmly. Li Huaqing nodded and kept his smile. Mr. President, comrades, in this chaos in Eastern Europe, the bravery of the Snowdance Corps is obvious to all, And the Snow Dance Corps is also the cornerstone of stabilizing the 5 countries in Eastern Europe. However, in the chaos, the Snow Dance Corps also suffered heavy losses. I suggest that the Snow Dance Corps expand its establishment and set up a large corps of about 100,000 people in Eastern Europe. It will help the Arctic Ocean Command and completely stabilize the whole of Eastern Europe. In the stunned eyes of countless people, Li Tianlan looked calm. I have had a preliminary communication with Minister Dongqing on this matter. The minister agreed with my proposal in principle and came up with a preliminary plan for the expansion of the Snow Dance Corps. The new Snow Dance Corps will have about 100,000 people. It will draw elites from the Air Force, the Navy, and the Border Control Corps to form a large comprehensive corps. In the long run, the new Snow Dance Corps will inevitably play a vital role in the stability of Eastern Europe. Everyone was stunned. Even Li Huaqing looked at Li Tianlan and did not speak for a long time. Before today, countless people in the Prince Group, the Special Warfare Group, and the Southeast Group were discussing the complete cancellation of the establishment of the Snow Dance Corps. The first step was to withdraw the wounded of the Snow Dance Corps from Eastern Europe. It seemed to be a very natural test. Moreover, with the 3 groups joining hands, the academics could not completely fall out with the 3 groups. The giant group could not withstand this result at all. In this way, the 3 groups could justifiably remove Li Tianlan from the position of marshal. But now, why did it become the expansion of the Snow Dance Corps when Li Tianlan came? Or a super-large comprehensive corps of 100,000 people? This was a blatant seizure of power. Everyone's inner thoughts were constantly changing. Now the key was that Li Tianlan could not know the idea of the 3 groups to cancel the establishment of the Snow Dance Corps. Then where did he get the courage to expand the Snow Dance Corps? Was he asking to be humiliated? Countless people's thoughts fluctuated. But the madness was not over. Li Tianlan knocked on the table and continued calmly. In addition, the minister and I believe that the Snow Dance Corps and the Arctic Ocean Command with 100,000 people are enough to deter the whole of Eastern Europe. So such a force does not have to be gathered in the 5 countries of Eastern Europe. In the future, most of the new Snow Dance Corps will be stationed in Snow Country to deter it. Boom! In an uproar, countless people raised their heads and looked at Li Tianlan in astonishment. Don't bother Marshal Li. In an indifferent and angry voice, Councillor Wen Siyuan of the Beihai province said indifferently, the Beihai Corps is currently negotiating with Snow Country, and there has been a very good result so far. I didn't stop you from negotiating with Snow Country. Li Tianlan looked into his eyes and said, you can talk freely, but after the negotiation, the results of the negotiation will be taken over by the Snow Dance Corps. He leaned forward and looked into Wen Siyuan's eyes. Don't you understand what I said? What a bastard! In the furious voice, Tang Wansen, who had been silent, suddenly stood up. Comrades, this is a blatant seizure of power. The Snow Dance Corps is a special warfare battalion. How can it expand to 100,000 people? It's completely nonsense. This has violated the original intention of the establishment of the Snow Dance Corps. How can a special warfare battalion take over the negotiation results of the Beihai Corps? Li Tianlan, do you really want to have troops in Eastern Europe? There was a moment of silence in the conference room. Countless voices rang out. It's true. I think it's appropriate for Beihai to guard Snow Country. Marshal Li has not thought it through. There's no need for the Snow Dance Corps to expand. As a special warfare battalion, it's better for the Snow Dance Corps to return home. In the countless voices, Li Huaqing's face darkened for a moment and he did not speak. A smile flashed in Tang Wansen's eyes, and he continued, and I personally think that the Snow Dance Corps has suffered heavy losses this time and should return home to recuperate. The Beihai Corps is currently strong. The Beihai Corps is responsible for the stability of Wulan State and the 5 countries in Eastern Europe. It's the best choice to help the Arctic Ocean Command. Of course, Comrade Tianlan has made contributions, but he is still too young. The heavy losses of the Snow Dance Corps are also related to his immature decision-making. I suggest that Comrade Tianlan's position be adjusted. He can retain the rank of marshal, but it's better to choose an old and prudent comrade as the new commander of the Snow Dance Corps. Li Tianlan looked at Tang Wansen jumping up and down coldly. His performance was recognized by countless people. People from the Prince Group, the Special Warfare Group, and the Southeast Group spoke out one after another in favor of withdrawing the Snow Dance Corps. At the same time, Li Tianlan's position as the commander of the Snow Dance Corps was revoked, and he retained the rank of marshal. Among them, Prime Minister Chen Fengqing of Jianghu State spoke. The direction of the meeting was changing irreversibly. Comrade Tianlan is responsible for the heavy losses of the Snow Dance Corps. In this regard, I think Marshal Li should give everyone a reasonable explanation and an explanation. As for Eastern Europe, there is no problem with the agreement. But after the Beihai Corps is stationed in Wulan State, there are some things. Tang Wansen's voice was still ringing. Li Tianlan laughed. Explanation. There is indeed an explanation. Li Tianlan said blandly, I have sent someone to count. By the time I attended the meeting, more than 1,000 elites of the Snow Dance Corps had died in the hands of the devil troop of the Wang family of Beihai. In addition, I was seriously injured in the raid of the Wang family of Beihai. Old Tang, is this the explanation you want? Everyone's hearts suddenly trembled. Li Tianlan's words were clearly saying that the Wang family of Beihai was in the way of the chaos in Eastern Europe. No matter whether this was true or not, it was not good to say it out. Besides, Tang Wansen glanced at Li Tianlan with a smile, without any panic. His old face was twisted like a chrysanthemum. The Wang family of Beihai? The devil troop? He said with a smile, Marshal Li is still too young, so you are deceived by some rumors from the outside world. I have served in Beihai and Jianghu State for many years, but I have never heard of the devil troop. Marshal Li said that the devil troop belongs to the Wang family of Beihai. Do you have any evidence? His smile disappeared and he said fiercely, You must produce evidence today. In the chaos in Eastern Europe, the Sword Emperor turned the tide on his own. If it weren't for him, Snow Country and Wulan State would have nothing to do with Jianghu State today. Now the Wang family of Beihai is about to take over Snow Country and Wulan State. But you are here to slander the devil troop and try to erase the credit of Beihai. It's outrageous. Today. Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows. I really can't produce evidence today. He nodded and looked at the audience. But there are some things, including the Snow Dance Corps and many other things, that the Wang family of Beihai must give me an explanation. He glanced at every big shot of the southeast group and said coldly, After the meeting, I will go to Beihai province and Mount Dibing. On the stage of formidable person of Mount Dibing, I will ask for an explanation from Wang Tianzong face to face. The warm atmosphere in the conference room suddenly became dead silent. Go to Mount Dibing, go to the stage of formidable person, and ask for an explanation from Wang Tianzong. That touch of madness completely broke out, with a raging fire, burning wildly. Tang Wansen was stunned for a long time. He stared into Li Tianlan's eyes and said word by word, How dare you go to Mount Dibing? Mount Dibing is also in Jianghu State. Why can't I go there? Li Tianlan's voice was cold, and his killing intent was undisguised. You slandered the Wang family of Beihai, and you still dare to go to Mount Dibing. Tang Wansen was as fierce as an old dog. Slander. Li Tianlan laughed wildly. You can say that this is slander, and I can think that you are ignorant. After all, your surname is not Wang. But when I stand on Mount Dibing, I will kill anyone from the Wang family of Beihai who dares to say that this is slander. Tang Wansen suddenly became furious. He stretched out his hand and almost pointed at Li Tianlan's nose and scolded, You little bastard who doesn't care about the overall situation. How dare you go to Mount Dibing to kill people? Even your grandfather didn't dare. Do you know what you are doing? Do you know what the overall situation is? Li Tianlan looked at him coldly and said seriously and calmly, What is the overall situation? Ignorant, bastard, arrogant. This kind of person who doesn't care about the overall situation shouldn't be here. Get out. Get out. Get out now. I suggest that Li Tianlan be removed from all positions immediately. This bastard is destined to commit treason like Li Guangtu. Jianghu State can't tolerate such a scourge. Li Guangtu is sanctimonious. What did he hand in? Bullshit. Tang Wansen's angry roar, which almost lost his mind, shook the whole conference room. Li Tianlan looked at him, and his eyes became deeper and calmer. He looked at the twisted face and asked again, What is the overall situation? Marshal Li is really too impulsive. Yi Dongsheng stood up and said calmly, There is no devil troop in the Wang family of Beihai. If you want to explain, we can negotiate with the Wang family of Beihai. You go to Mount Dibbing, which is ignoring the overall situation. At least the reason you said is not enough for you to desecrate the forbidden area of Mount Dibbing. Li Tianlan said, "Oh," and asked, "Desecrate?" Yi Dongsheng did not speak. On the stage of Formidable Person, Yi Dongsheng's name did not appear on that stone. But the names of countless elders and ancestors of the Yi family were on that stone. The names of the Wang family of Beihai, the southeast group, countless people who did not have the surname Wang, their ancestors and elders were also engraved on the stone of Formidable Person. At that time, hundreds of years of glory had been accumulated. His eyes were extremely firm. "You mean my reason is not enough?" Li Tianlan looked at Yi Dongsheng and asked. "Yes, it's not enough." Yi Dongsheng's voice became more and more firm. Li Tianlan said, "Oh," and laughed. "If it's not enough, then it's not enough. I'm not going to find any more reasons." He looked at the audience with a smile and asked, "Tell me, what is the overall situation?" "The overall situation you are talking about. Whose overall situation is it?" Chapter 620. No one could answer his question. What was the big picture? This had always been a simple yet complicated question. It was simple and clear at a glance, but it was so complicated that it could change at any time. The overall situation of Jianghu state was stability, unity, and anything else. It didn't really matter. The important thing was to look at the big picture. When this sentence was said, it would definitely hurt the interests of a certain person or a certain force. Therefore, in the hearts of those who were sacrificed or were forced to sacrifice, the so-called big picture was compromise. Li Tianlan did not want to compromise. Therefore, it didn't matter whose overall situation it was. The important thing was that he would not compromise. Impudent, bastard, little bastard. Tang Wansen's voice became a little vague because of his excitement. He kept thinking in a furious voice. He stared at Li Tianlan with resentment in his eyes and gnashed his teeth. "If I had known this, I would have arrested all the traitors of the Li family and executed them." Li Tianlan looked at him, his eyes still gentle. "You talk too much." Tang Wansen glared at him, looking as if he wanted to bite Li Tianlan to death. No one said a word. Li Tianlan might not know why Tang Wansen was so extreme, but everyone present knew what was going on when they saw Tang Wansen's invitation list for this meeting. Tang clan was a major clan in Yuzhou province. Although it was not the top clan, it would never be looked down upon. Tang clan in Yuzhou province could be regarded as one of the most powerful branches of Tang clan of Beihai. Tang clan of Beihai was second to none in the world, not only in Jianghu state. Tang Shi, the daughter of the Tang family, was the fiancée of Wang Xianxia, the heir of the Wang family of Beihai. At a young age, she had begun to control the economic power of the Wang family of Beihai. Tang Wansen was a very ambitious person. Over the years, because of his ambition, the relationship between the Tang family of Yuzhou and the Tang family of Beihai had been very subtle. He had served as the deputy commander of the Beihai Corps, the deputy secretary general of the army headquarters of Jianghu state, and the deputy minister. Before he left office many years ago, he had wanted to compete with Qi Baitsong for the position of the minister of the standing minister. With his age and experience at that time, it was not impossible. However, in the end, he still couldn't suppress Qi Baitsong and had no choice but to leave the military after losing the competition. The reason for his departure from the army was very complicated. To put it in perspective, the aftermath of the Li Consortium's treason case had not yet been settled. The Southeast Group was busy reorganizing its internal affairs and had no time to expand. In addition to this reason, the Tang family of Beihai did not give him enough support. From that moment on, the relationship between the Tang family of Yuzhou and the Tang family of Beihai was almost frozen. There was no doubt that he held a grudge against the Tang Corps and even against Mount Dibbing. The immense resentment made him change his choice without batting an eyelid. He began to approach Wang Qinglei and successfully obtained Wang Qinglei's promise. The next generation of the Tang family was generally quite mediocre, but Tang Wansen was still filled with hope for the family. He had placed the future of the family in the hands of his son-in-law, and his son-in-law was extremely outstanding. Before he even reached middle age, he had already become a high-ranking member of the North Sea Legion and a trusted aide to Wang Qinglei, so Tang Wansen was very pleased with himself. Then his son-in-law died. He died in Li Tianlan's hands during his trip to Eastern Europe. Chen Qingwan, the former vice-marshal of the Snowdance Corps, was Tang Wansan's son-in-law. For the Tang family, this hatred was absolutely irreconcilable. In the chaos of curses, Tang Wansan stared at Li Tianlan and said vaguely, "Little bastard, when you die in Mount Dibbing, the whole Li family will be buried with you." At that moment, Li Tianlan's eyes narrowed slightly. His expression was still calm, but a kind of looming danger directly spread to the whole conference room. His eyes were quiet, but they were as sharp as a knife, shining in all directions. He turned his eyes away from Tang Wansan, looked at the audience, and repeated the question he had asked several times. "Who can tell me what the overall situation is?" Still no one spoke. At this moment, Li Tianlan was calm. But in everyone's opinion, he was like a madman. He was indeed crazy. If not, how could he go to Mount Dibbing? "You little..." "All right." Li Huaqing's voice suddenly sounded, interrupting Tang Wansan's curses. He frowned, glanced at several counselors and giants of the Southeast group, and said slowly, "Mr. Tang, pay attention to your wording. Comrade Tianlan is the Marshal of Jianghu State. Whatever he does, he should have a reasonable explanation. I hope everyone can restrain themselves." The corner of Tang Wansan's mouth moved, and he subconsciously glanced at Wang Qinglei not far away. Wang Qinglei's face was still a little pale. He bowed his head and drank tea calmly. Tang Wansan quieted down and stopped talking. "Well, Tianlan, tell me about your Mount Dibbing." Li Huaqing looked at Li Tianlan and asked indifferently. There was a touch of warmth in Li Tianlan's eyes. "This chapter is not over. Please turn the page." After he joined the giant group, his relationship with the academics was so delicate. At least at this time, Li Huaqing's seemingly indifferent attitude was actually to find a way out for him. But he didn't need these things. From the second he entered the conference room, Li Tianlan had made up his mind. He stood on this stage, and he would not go down unless he died. "I've already told you the reason," he said softly. "Wang Tianzong has to give me an explanation about the Devil Troop, the loss of the Snowdance Corps, and his cooperation with Rothschild." "Marshal Li, what you said is groundless. There is no evidence, so it's not a reason." Yi Dongsheng's voice was cold. Li Tianlan smiled, looked at Yi Dongsheng, and said expressionlessly, "Not a reason? So what?" Yi Dongsheng froze for a moment and suddenly couldn't say a word. Yes, even if it was not a reason, so what? He had already said that it was not enough if the reason was not enough, but he didn't want to look for it anymore. He just wanted to go to Mount Dibbing. It didn't matter what the reason was, he just wanted to go to Mount Dibbing. No matter whether everyone accepted it or not. Marshal Li, no one can deny it, and no one is qualified to deny it. The stability of Jianghu State is above everything else. Qi Baitsong slowly raised his head and looked at Li Tianlan with sharp eyes. "No one thinks you are going to Mount Dibbing for tea based on your current attitude." Li Tianlan looked at him, squinted, and said, What do you mean by A gentle and amused voice rang out unhurriedly. There were many meanings. This word was very interesting. With the rise and fall of the tone, it could express different emotions. But it was the first time that someone asked it face to face. Li Tianlan turned his head and looked over. That was the middle of the conference room. Beside Li Huaqing was Chen Fengqing. Li Tianlan looked at them one by one and finally stopped at the fifth position. Jianghu State Council. Minister Ji Wanzhong of the Ministry of Supervision looked at him with a smile and waited for his answer. Li Tianlan twitched the corner of his mouth. The Southeast group used to be very big, and so did the Li family. Li Honghe used to have high standards. At that time, among the camp of the Li family in the Southeast group, Li Honghe was most optimistic about two people in the political circle. One was Wu Zhengmin, and the other was Ji Wanzhong. During the more than 20 years when the Li family fell into the dust, Ji Wanzhong, who had always been regarded as the confidant of the Li family, had been rising rapidly and finally became a giant. Li Tianlan nodded and said, There was no way to talk on this day. Ji Wanzhong was stunned for a moment, then shook his head with a smile and said with emotion, "You are still too young and full of vigor. Tianlan, I don't recommend you to go to Mount Dibbing, because no matter what the result is, it will destroy the overall situation of Jianghu State. It's not appropriate." Vice President Wan Qingyun, who had always been with Ji Wanzhong, said briefly, "Why do you need to prove something that doesn't exist?" Wang Qinglei said in a light tone. I don't agree with Marshal Li going to Mount Dibbing. Yi Dongxing directly expressed his attitude. Young man, it's better to be steady. Chen Fengqing looked at Li Huaqing and gave his opinion with a smile. Li Tianlan's face was still calm, but there was impatience in his eyes. I'm here to attend the meeting today, not to ask for your opinions. You can express your opinions, and you can also consider whether I'm qualified to continue to be the marshal. It doesn't matter. Li Tianlan put his hands on the table and looked at everyone present. It has nothing to do with you if I go to Mount Dibbing, and it has nothing to do with whether I'm a marshal or not. I'm the palace lord of Emperor Dong's palace, and I'm using this identity to ask Wang Tianzong for an explanation. There was a sudden silence. Tang Wansen, who had been quiet for a while, suddenly stood up and screamed, Treason! This is treason! Damn Emperor Dong's palace, execute him, this damn little bastard. I propose a vote. Enough! Li Huaqing suddenly pounded the table and stood up. He glared at Li Tianlan, then at Tang Wansen, and remained silent for a long time. Everyone was looking at him, waiting for his decision. It might be impossible to vote on whether Li Tianlan was a traitor or not. But for the moment, a vote was enough to remove Li Tianlan from his military post. Mr. President. Chen Fengqing said slowly, how about? Li Huaqing waved his hand. He took a deep breath and picked up the teacup. After a while he said calmly, the meeting is over. After saying this, he pushed the chair away and left the conference room without looking back. The conference room was noisy for a moment and then quieted down. Chen Fengqing thought for a while, shook his head with a smile, and left. More and more people understood the reason for the meeting to be over. This chapter is not over. Please turn the page. Meaning. Everyone was deep in thought. Only the parliamentarians and giants belonging to the Wang family of Beihai looked a little pale. Strictly speaking, Li Huaqing's dismissal at this time was not because he was partial to Li Tianlan. Everyone in the Prince Group and the Special Warfare Group accepted this because they were also watching. Li Tianlan was going to Mount Dibbing. What result he would get on Mount Dibbing directly determined the direction of this meeting. Li Tianlan was very strong. But he was going to Mount Dibbing. No one thought that Li Tianlan would win. Even if he would not lose, he would never win. He might even die directly on Mount Dibbing. As long as Li Tianlan died, even if he was given the rank of marshal, so what? After his death, countless people present were destined not to be soft-hearted, and the Li family would be destroyed. Even if Li Tianlan was lucky to survive, as long as the Wang family of Beihai fought back with all its strength, they could take away everything Li Tianlan had now. The rank of marshal, Snow Dance Corps, Wulan State. Nothing could be kept. Li Huaqing and the academics undoubtedly had hope for him. However, more people were now waiting to see Li Tianlan's joke, as well as the Wang family of Beihai's joke. Li Tianlan smiled. His figure twisted in the conference room, and the next second, he had appeared outside the conference room. The sun was shining, the blue sky and white clouds. Autumn came down. The heat of late summer had brought the coolness of early autumn. Li Tianlan walked forward alone. Blue water, blue sky, green trees, and grass. Everything was so beautiful. On this day, at this moment, he finally carried the Li family on his shoulders. This was his Li family. The gate of the hidden dragon sea was right in front of him. Li Tianlan looked quietly in the direction of Prince Yang's mansion. Under the sun, he stretched out his palm. There was a sudden buzz in the bedroom of Prince Yang's mansion. The huge sword box that had been placed on Li Tianlan's bedside completely exploded. The dark Shenyuan sword rose into the air. The sun, moon, and stars had dimmed. But the huge dark sword was still full of unparalleled majesty. A faint and somewhat unclear feeling of elation filled the room. The huge sword shook violently. In the clear sound of breaking, the bright glass was broken into powder. The dark giant sword passed through the whole mansion in an instant. This was a sword that had consumed all the sword energy but still had a soul. It returned to nothingness in the void, tearing the space like a transparent flowing light. In the living room of the mansion, Qin Weibai stood in front of the huge French window and watched the scene in a daze. She really didn't know martial arts, so she couldn't feel the sword energy or see the transparent flowing light. But the moment the sword box was broken, The whole manor was filled with an indescribable coldness. That feeling of coldness was getting farther and farther away. Qin Weibai was silent for a while and whispered, "He has set off." "Are you sure I don't need to go?" Wei Kunlun sat on the sofa and said without looking up, "I'm not sure." Qin Weibai shook her head. "But he won't let you go. If you go, he will be angry. You only worry about whether he will be angry or not, but not about his safety." Wei Kunlun looked at Qin Weibai and asked, "This is caring." Qin Weibai was silent for a while and said calmly, "I care about his will. More than anything." Wei Kunlun looked at her for a while and suddenly laughed. "You really don't look like it," he said. "Far from it." Qin Weibai narrowed her eyes and looked at him. She ordered, "Let military counselor come to see me." Wei Kunlun looked at Qin Weibai playfully and didn't speak for a long time. Qin Weibai raised her eyebrows, and she suddenly became cold and sharp. Wei Kunlun lowered his head and picked up the teacup. He said lightly, "He is different from me. Military counselor is the real confidant of the palace master. Let him come to see you." He shook his head and said lightly, "I think you should go to see him." Qin Weibai turned her head and looked in the direction of the hidden dragon sea. That was the return path of the sword light and also the starting point. In the sunlight that no one could see, the transparent flowing light tore up all the afterglow of the old era and fell in Li Tianlan's hand with the brilliance of the new era. The giant sword was nothing. Li Tianlan looked down at his palm and the road under his feet. He had walked out of the hidden dragon sea and out of the heavily guarded alley. The busy and prosperous Yuzhou showed up in front of him little by little. Li Tianlan looked north, in the direction of the Wang family of Beihai. At this moment, under his feet, there was a journey. End of this chapter. Bookmark for easy reading. Chapter 621. Dongshan Street was not considered a forbidden area in Yuzhou, but it was definitely one of the areas with the best environment, the quietest atmosphere, and the cleanest streets in the entire Yuzhou city. Sitting in an elegantly decorated restaurant, he finished the last mouthful of rice and looked at the road outside the window. After a moment of silence he said softly, "2 more bowls of rice." Hu Yang looked at the empty bowls in front of him and was stunned for a moment. He subconsciously waved his hand and called the waiter over. In a low voice he said, "Serve the rice." He paused and continued to emphasize, "Big bowls." The waiter nodded and looked at the table in front of Hu Yang. He stuck out his tongue. There were 6 or 7 empty bowls on the clean table. The dishes were full. Of the 8 dishes, other than the vegetable dish that could be seen to be stir-fried bamboo shoots, the other dishes were almost completely eaten. Hu Yang carefully sat down with a pot of tea. He looked at the young man who was waiting to eat and said with a smile, "Do you want to change the dishes?" Opposite Hu Yang was a young man who looked to be at most in his 20s. He had a delicate appearance and a thin figure. He wore ordinary military pants, military boots, and a white shirt. His attire was not extraordinary. However, as the owner of the restaurant, Hu Yang had lived most of his life and it was his first time seeing such a quiet young man. That kind of quiet came from his every move. Hu Yang could not describe this feeling, but he instinctively felt that the other was a bit scary. The young man nodded and did not speak. The waiter served the rice. The quiet, almost illusory young man poured some broth into the rice and ate the bamboo shoots one mouthful at a time. His table manners were not ugly. He did not wolf down the food, but the food was quickly consumed. When the new dishes were served, the 2 bowls of rice in front of the young man had already been emptied. Hu Yang drank his tea and called the waiter to continue serving the dishes. His gaze became more and more strange. He had never seen a person who could eat so much. Nearly 1.5 kilograms of rice and a table full of dishes were all devoured by him. It seemed that he was not full at all. The young man picked up a piece of braised pork and put it in his bowl. This was the restaurant's signature dish. It was fat but not greasy and was very popular. Another bowl of rice went down his stomach. The young man suddenly said, "When I was young, my life was very hard. Sometimes, the adults in my family could not even afford salt. I ate meat, but it was very little. Because of the lack of salt, I could only use some other ingredients, so it tasted very bitter." Hu Yang was stunned. He smiled politely and did not know what to say. "Although it's a little bitter, It's still very delicious. Have you ever eaten rice cooked with moldy rice? The young man thought for a moment and said, "The rice soup is black and stinky. It's disgusting. Compared to the rice here, it's like heaven and earth." Hu Yang poured a cup of tea for himself and said softly, "Now the bitterness is finally over and the sweetness is here, right?" "Not really." The young man was silent for a while. "Now I can eat meat, and I can let the adults in my family eat meat, but people's hearts are not satisfied. I want them to live better. Do you think that's wrong?" "That's right," Hu Yang said. The young man grunted in acknowledgement and silently ate his rice for the whole night. He said lightly, "It's just that most of them are gone now." The atmosphere was somewhat stifling. Hu Yang forced a smile and said softly, "Want some wine?" The young man shook his head. "Continue serving the rice." Bowl after bowl of rice was served, and the bowls became empty. The new dishes on the table gradually decreased. The young man, who ate more than 5 kilograms of rice in one breath, finally put down his bowl and chopsticks with satisfaction and said softly, "It tastes good." Hu Yang smiled and poured a cup of tea and handed it over. The young man picked up the teacup and suddenly smiled. "What I'm most satisfied with is that there's no poison in the food. I like it very much." Hu Yang's hand suddenly froze, and his face was a little pale. "I don't know what you mean, sir." "You don't know me?" The young man said softly in a soft voice. "On this street, those who don't know me will die." There seemed to be something sharp fluctuating in the space. The hand holding the teapot was trembling slightly. Hu Yang smiled bitterly. "Greetings, Your Highness," he said softly. The young man nodded and pointed outside the window. "I also want to have a whole street in Yuzhou, and an excellent chef like you. What do you think?" "Good. Very good," Hu Yang stammered. The young man grunted, but he didn't ask anything for no reason. He just said lightly, "Another pot of tea." Hu Yang quickly retreated and ran back quickly. He put the teapot in front of the young man and hesitated to say anything. "I didn't come here for you," the young man said slowly. "I just heard that there's a street here that completely belongs to the Wang family of Beihai, so I came to have a look. I'm not interested in your information transmission." Hu Yang wiped the sweat on his head, and his body trembled slightly. This was Dongshan Street. At the end of Dongshan Street was Dongshan Park. The street and the park were the property of the Wang family of Beihai. Every inch of land, every shop, and every person on the street belonged to the Wang family of Beihai. Sometimes, it could almost be said to be the headquarters of the Southeast Group. All the current members of the Southeast Group, as well as the old comrades who had retired from the Southeast Group, lived in Dongshan Park. As soon as the calm young man in front of him appeared here, Hu Yang had already reported the information. But until now, he didn't know what the young man was doing here. "This is a starting point," the young man said softly. "Of course, I can wait for a few people here." Hu Yang's heart sank slightly for no reason. A majestic and solemn black car with a red flag drove through the street outside the window. The young man looked at it quietly. He put down the teacup and said softly, "The tea is good." Hu Yang opened his mouth and just wanted to say something. The space in front of him seemed to be twisted, and the young man had disappeared in front of him. Tang Wanson's irritable mood gradually calmed down until he was close to his home. The meeting in the morning ended abruptly. He was undoubtedly the most unwilling one. After the meeting, he, Yi Dongsheng, Wang Qinglei, and all the big shots of the Southeast Group had a deep exchange of opinions. It was not until near noon that he returned to the Tang family in Dongshan Park. "Senior Tang, there's no need to be angry. Li Tianlan's matter has put Mount Dibbing in a difficult position. Now it's a good thing. Since he dared to go up the mountain to court death, it's just a good thing. If he dies on Mount Dibbing, no one can say anything." In the back row of the spacious carriage, a middle-aged man with a scar on his face said with a sneer. He was an expert from the Wang family of Beihai. On the issue of Li Tianlan, the Southeast Group had decided to fully support Tang Wanson and let him, the old comrade, take the lead to suppress Li Tianlan. Tang Wanson agreed, so the Wang family of Beihai naturally had to give him full protection. Although the middle-aged man with the codename Ghostface was not as good as Firmament in the Wang family of Beihai, his strength of the half-step invincible realm was enough to deal with most dangers. After all, Everyone knew that even if Li Tianlan was targeted by Tang Wansen, he would not be crazy enough to take action in person. Today is just the beginning. It's better for him to die on Mount Dibbing. If the big shots on Mount Dibbing don't kill him, when he comes back, I still have ways to torture him and the so-called Li family. Tang Wansen said gloomily. He thought for a moment and suddenly said, "How's the preparation of the logistics department?" Ghostface was stunned and said lightly, "The death list of the Snowdance Corps has been handed over to the political department and transmitted to the logistics department. At present, the first 1/3 of the pension has been issued." That's it. Tang Wansen waved his hand lightly and said, "There's no need to send the remaining 2/3. While Li Tianlan is going to Mount Dibbing, let's write a good article about the Snowdance Corps." Write an article? You still want pension? Bullshit. This time, we must let the whole Jianghu state see what happens to those who follow the Li family. The car drove into Dongshan Park. Ghostface did not speak. His body tensed up and he looked ahead with a dignified face. Tang Wansen was stunned. The car was moving forward. A large modern villa was getting closer and closer in front. The car window gradually covered the top floor of the villa. A faintly discernible figure seemed to be sitting there. Li Tianlan. Ghostface's facial muscles twitched, and he said word by word in a deep voice. Tang Wansen was stunned and then grinned. "That little bastard dares to come here? Stop the car," he said angrily. "I'd like to see what he wants to say to me." The car stopped. Ghostface and Tang Wansen got out of the car at the same time. The noon sun was still hot even in early autumn. The scorching temperature fell from the sky. On the top floor of the villa, Li Tianlan sat quietly and smoked. Seeing Tang Wansen and Ghostface get out of the car, he raised his eyebrows slightly. "How dare you come here?" Tang Wansen looked up and stared at Li Tianlan. His tone was full of rage. Li Tianlan took a drag on his cigarette and looked at Tang Wansen. His voice was gentle. "Senior Tang, you haven't answered my question yet." "What question?" Tang Wansen frowned, and his anger grew stronger. "Get out of here. Can any stray dog climb up to the roof of my Tang family? Li Tianlan, if you don't get out of here, I promise to make you pay a heavy price that you don't want to accept." "Ha!" Li Tianlan stood up with a smile and looked at Tang Wansen and Ghostface condescendingly. "It seems that you still don't understand," he said softly and took out the cigarette butt. The nervous guard was beside Tang Wansen. The face of Ghostface beside him changed dramatically. "Senior Tang, be careful." The cigarette butt fell in the air with a soothing trace. The flame flickered in the air and instantly became a raging fire all over the sky. Li Tianlan moved forward. 1 step, 2 steps. His figure walked across the roof. Faster and faster. The whole villa was shaking under his feet. In the loud roar, the top floor of the villa collapsed directly. In the smoke and dust all over the sky, his figure had directly swooped down like a goshawk. The flames were burning in the rising smoke and dust. Under the sun, Ghostface roared. The dazzling lightning that was condensed to the extreme suddenly bloomed in his hands. The powerful sword intent kept rotating in the lightning and rushed toward Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan didn't even look at it. His figure directly smashed the lightning and tore the sword intent apart. He suddenly rushed forward in a whistling sound. Ghostface took Tang Wansen to hide in the villa and took out his mobile phone at the same time. "Who?" In the roar of rage, a fat middle-aged man in disheveled clothes rushed out. Looking at the raging fire outside, he was stunned for a moment and then saw Tang Wansen. "Dad, this is... Tang Ming, go back." Tang Wansen's face changed. The next second, Ghostface had already rushed into the villa with him. Every villa in Dongshan Park seemed to be far away from each other, but they were connected. Through the basement, they could leave here as soon as possible. Li Tianlan's figure rushed over. The fierce-looking Tang Ming opened his mouth and had just turned around. Puff! An extremely hard palm stabbed directly into his belly in an instant. His spine was completely torn off in an instant. His internal organs were suddenly crushed under the sword intent. Tang Ming didn't even have time to scream. Li Tianlan casually raised his hand and his body, which weighed more than 100 kilograms, directly exploded into flesh and blood all over the sky. Li Tianlan paused. Ghostface, who had taken Tang Wansen into the villa, pressed the villa's alloy door. Without any hesitation, Li Tianlan directly rushed over. The loud heartbeat kept beating between heaven and earth. Li Tianlan's figure smashed the thick alloy door in an instant and rushed into the living room. In the living room, the core figures of the Tang family stood up subconsciously. A noble woman with a haughty expression was pointing at Li Tianlan and shouting something. But before her voice reached his ears, Li Tianlan had already removed her arm. With a shrill scream, the woman was swept away and her body was directly embedded in the wall. In the dense cracks of the wall, the people of the Tang family finally realized that disaster was coming and fled with Ghost Face Mask and Tang Wansen. Li Tianlan's body directly crashed into them. In the countless terrified screams, the body of Tang Wansen's youngest son was directly kicked into 2 pieces. His arm slashed out like a sword. The heads of the 2 noble women flew into the air with blood. Li Tianlan's speed was getting faster and faster. The illusory and yet real sword intent appeared and spun wildly around him. In an instant, countless pieces of blood and flesh were flying everywhere. Annihilation. Without any hesitation, Li Tianlan directly attacked. He didn't let go of the Tang family, not even a dog. Li Tianlan, how dare you? The ghost face trembled as it roared in disbelief. Li Tianlan smiled and strode forward in the face of the lightning shooting toward him. Ghostface pushed Tang Wansen away and rushed over at the same time. The 2 figures collided in an instant. The clear sound of bones cracking suddenly rang out. With a splashing of blood. Li Tianlan didn't carry any sword intent around him. The violent power from his fist was transmitted to the Ghostface again and again, shattering the lightning and shattering the layer of ice. Ghostface's body floated in the air in the great power. Countless pieces of blood and broken bones were scattered in every corner of the villa. Bang! In what seemed like a long time, but also a short time, Ghostface's body fell completely in front of Tang Wansen. Or it was no longer a body. All the blood, bones, and muscles were broken by Li Tianlan. What fell on the ground was just a piece of human skin. Tang Wansen didn't dare to look back. His old face was completely distorted. Trembling, he kept pressing the password to the door of the basement on the wall. The whole villa was extremely quiet. There were corpses and blood everywhere. Li Tianlan came over, looked at Tang Wansen, and said gently, "Senior Tang, don't you remember the password?" Tang Wansen turned to look at Li Tianlan. His body trembled violently, and he was in extreme pain and despair. In his sight were the corpses of countless relatives. This was his Tang family. All the members of the Tang family were here. Now he was the only one left in the whole Tang family. You. He looked at Li Tianlan and couldn't say a word. Bang! Li Tianlan directly smashed the thick and solid basement door with his fist. He smiled and said softly, "Where are you going?" "I'll send you." "You madman. You, how dare you?" I am. "I know you are the former member of Parliament of the Empire and the Deputy Minister of the Army Ministry." Li Tianlan's smile faded little by little. "But you haven't figured out a problem." His palm fell on Tang Wansen's head, and he exerted a little force. Tang Wansen screamed at the top of his voice. The hard skull was cracking little by little, and blood flowed out of Tang Wansen's eyes, nostrils, ears and mouth. Intense pain swept over him, bringing with it boundless darkness. Li Tianlan looked at Tang Wansen with no expression and asked the question he asked at the meeting again. "What is the overall situation?" Tang Wansen's voice trailed off and eventually became silent. Li Tianlan let go of his body and said flatly, "From today on, I am the overall situation of Jianghu State." Chapter 622. The raging flames continued to burn, and a large amount of smoke and dust rushed into the sky. In Dongshan Park, the luxury villa surrounded by countless flowers and trees completely collapsed. Blood-stained gravel, steel bars, and concrete blocks flew everywhere, and the harsh alarm sounded throughout the manor in an instant. The entire Dongshan Park was completely alarmed. As the most important core of the Wang family of Beihai in Yuzhou, Dongshan Park did sometimes play the role of the headquarters of the Southeast Group. The Wang family of Beihai invited all the retired leaders of the Southeast Group to live here. In addition to the environment, it naturally gave the place sufficient security. Before the completion of Dongshan Park, the Wang family of Beihai had been negotiating with Jianghu State. The negotiations took nearly 2 years. Under the push of the Southeast Group and many old members of parliament, Jianghu State finally agreed that the Wang family of Beihai would be responsible for the security measures of Dongshan Park. It didn't seem to be a big deal, and the Wang family of Beihai didn't go too far. It just recruited more than 5,000 security guards through its own security company to be stationed in Dongshan Park all year round. But everyone knew where the so-called 5,000 security guards came from. They were the real elites of the Beihai Corps. Today, these security guards had served in Dongshan Park for nearly 20 years. They could even be said to be the seniors of all the members of the Beihai Corps. As soon as the alarm sounded in Dongshan Park, the 5,000 elite soldiers began to arm themselves without hesitation. In different directions, in different locations, amidst the ear-piercing alarm, the 5,000 elite soldiers gathered in different corners and rushed towards the Tang family's villa at full speed. The footsteps that shook half of the park rumbled like a ferocious tiger. The roar of the collapse shook in the smoke and dust all over the sky. The Tang family of Yuzhou had completely become a thing of the past. The huge heartbeat was still beating in the ruins, as if it was shaking the whole space. Countless elites were gathering. In the fire and ruins, Li Tianlan walked out with no expression on his face. The flowers and trees around the villa gave off a burnt smell in the flames. The pool in front of the main gate cracked, and the water flowed on the ground and was completely evaporated by the flames. The flames twisted the air, and everything in sight was a little blurred. The large ruins looked extremely decayed. Li Tianlan was silent for a moment and waved his hand. The fierce wind passed by, bringing frost with it. The sudden gust of wind suppressed the flames. The thick black smoke rose for a moment and then fell down. The wind was still howling. Kacha. Kacha. With Li Tianlan as the center, the world within a radius of at least 100 meters around him was violently twisted and raged with a fierce wind. In the chaotic sound, withered flowers, plants, and wilted trees were completely blown up by the wind in the blink of an eye. The sword intent was extremely illusory and fierce in the wind. Huge trunks and flowers flew high into the sky and were completely smashed by the invisible sword intent. Wood chips flew everywhere, and all traces completely dissipated in the air. Li Tianlan's surroundings suddenly became flat. The ruins were gone. The trees were gone. The flowers and grass were gone. It was completely empty. It was as if the once illustrious Tang clan had never existed in the first place. There was no trace of them. Li Tianlan looked up at the sky. There was a faint buzzing sound in the sky. The invisible drone flew over the flat land at a controlled speed, and the camera recorded everything Li Tianlan did. Li Tianlan quietly looked at the drone in the air. After a moment of silence, he finally did nothing. His gaze passed through this piece of flat land and looked at the villas not far away. Suddenly, he laughed. At this moment, countless pairs of eyes in Dongshan Park were quietly watching Li Tianlan. As his eyes swept over, countless pairs of eyes looked away. In the villa closest to the Tang clan, an old man with gray hair rubbed the two chess pieces in his hands. He stood in front of the window like a statue, and his body was extremely stiff. Beside the old man stood the eldest son who came from Jianghu for the meeting in Yuzhou. At this time, they looked at each other and saw fear in each other's eyes as they looked at Li Tianlan standing in the sun. Old Tang has been very active these days. Deep. This chapter is not over. Please turn the page. In the dull atmosphere, the middle-aged man who looked very young glanced at his father and said in a low voice, "Isn't that right?" The old man sighed and touched his white hair. There is no successor in the Tang clan. After Chen Qingwan was killed by Li Tianlan, old Tang was a little desperate. The Tang family must have gotten Wang Qinglei's promise. That's why they're doing this. He put all his hopes on the meeting. Today, he thought it was a great achievement. Everyone in the Tang clan, hey, young and old, came here to celebrate for old Tang. You see, one person, one sword, one fire, directly wiped out the entire Tang clan. The old man looked at Li Tianlan who was standing not far away. Feeling the other party's eyes sweeping over, he subconsciously avoided it and sighed. He is a very good normal person. Why did he compete with a madman? Isn't he courting death? The middle-aged man, who was already a border governor of Jianghu State, lowered his head beside the old man and said nothing. Countless footsteps rushed up and down in Dongshan Park like a raging tide, rushing over at a very fast speed. The old man's face changed. The middle-aged man's face also changed. Call Dongxing. He must come out on this matter. Hurry up. The old man said quickly and continued. In addition, call Wang Qinglei and ask him to come here immediately. Tang Wanson stood up for him. Now that something has happened, no one can hide. The middle-aged man frowned and said with a wry smile. Dad, why do we need to call for such a big thing? I'm afraid we know what we should know now. He looked at Li Tianlan, who was still standing there and looking at the drone. The sun shone on him, elongating his shadow. He stood there quietly, calm, indifferent, fearless, and full of fighting spirit. What an idiot! The middle-aged man's mouth twitched. I really don't know how to end this matter. End. The old man glanced at him. This is not a problem for you to worry about. He pointed at Li Tianlan. I guess he is the only one who hasn't figured out how to end it. What are you worried about? The middle-aged man took a deep look at his father and suddenly asked, Then what are you worried about? Anyway, I'm not worried about Li Tianlan. The old man shook his head. Listening to the roar of approaching footsteps, the corners of his mouth kept twitching. These idiots. Now this guy is crazy enough to kill Tang Wanson, but he doesn't dare to kill these 5,000 people? Stupid, ask them to stop. The middle-aged man didn't move. No one moved in the entire Winter Mountain Park except for these 5,000 people. In the silence, only the crazy rushing footsteps became clearer and clearer. These 5,000 people had been wearing the hat of security guards for nearly 20 years. But they were soldiers. From Beihai to Yuzhou, this park was the territory they swore to defend. It was their belief. They could not stop, no matter what they faced. The middle-aged man glanced at Li Tianlan. He was still standing there, calm and collected, unhurried. That calmness exuded from his every move, with ferocious bloodthirst and hysterical madness. Everyone was like that. As long as he was mentally prepared to face the consequences, he could do anything. The first batch of elites of the Beihai Corps rushed out of the woods and onto the flat ground. They were densely packed. In the thunderous footsteps, a ferocious and furious roar suddenly rang out. Kill! There was no hesitation, no wait and see. They were soldiers, not negotiation experts. In the face of the assailant, that was all they could do. Kill! More and more figures rushed toward Li Tianlan. Slowly, Li Tianlan turned around. He raised his eyebrows. The elites of the Beihai Corps rushed up without hesitation, leaving no room for negotiation. Strong, unyielding, and indomitable, Li Tianlan stretched out his hand. In everyone's sight, his palm touched his back. This chapter is not over. Please turn the page. The empty nothingness was clenched in his hand. There was no hesitation, no retreat, and no probing. Li Tianlan's palm swung out almost impudently and casually. Carelessly. However, the bright and beautiful sunlight in the sky suddenly darkened for a moment. Day and night alternated. A dark and majestic giant sword appeared in Li Tianlan's hand. The sun, the moon, and the stars were rotating. Mountains, rivers, lakes, and seas were roaring. Shattering style. A sword light as long as 100 meters appeared in front of everyone at the moment when the day and night alternated. This sword light was so abrupt, like an illusion, but the crisis of death was so clear. Puff! There was a dull sound as if heaven and earth were completely cut apart. Countless blood instantly dyed a large area of the flat ground and woods red. The sword light that was condensed to the extreme was so crazy and resolute. It cut the crowd of the Wang family of Beihai into pieces without any mercy. Countless blood and broken bodies shot out wildly. Countless roars and roars suddenly quieted down. Li Tianlan laughed. His voice echoed in this world, cold and gentle. Go on. There was dead silence in Winter Mountain Park. Li Tianlan. Even the elites of the Beihai Corps stagnated in the scene like Azura's purgatory. They were not afraid of blood. But who could have thought that there would be such a day when there was no war in Jianghu state? At the front of the crowd, a burly middle-aged man suddenly roared with great shock and anger. You slaughtered Elder Tang's family and killed people here. What do you think Jianghu state is? What do you think Winter Mountain Park is? Are you going to commit treason? Li Tianlan glanced at him casually. Who are you? Wangyue, commander of the 3rd Reconnaissance Division of the Beihai Corps. The middle-aged man strode out of the crowd. I'm also the highest officer here. Am I qualified to talk to you? Oh, Li Tianlan said, today, I killed the dog of the Wang family of Beihai. This is a personal grudge between me and Wang Tianzong. Don't talk about the country and treason so easily. You're not young anymore. Why are you so childish? Wang Wangyue's face was purple and red, looking extremely ferocious. Li Tianlan laughed. Even if what I did was a little inappropriate, there are so many big shots in the Wang family of Beihai. Everyone is focused on the overall situation. You won't argue with me, right? You have to take the overall situation into consideration. Wang Wangyue's eyes darkened. The words, take the overall situation into consideration, stabbed his heart like a knife, making it hard for him to breathe. For a moment, his ears were filled with the words, take the overall situation into consideration. On the other side, Li Tianlan chuckled and raised the sword in his hand again without any hesitation. You? Wang Wangyue took a deep breath. Do you think there is no one in the Wang family of Beihai? No. Li Tianlan said blandly, I don't know if there is anyone in the Wang family of Beihai, but now there is no one in the Li family, my Li family. If there was someone in the Li family. If there was someone in the Li family who could be used, how could he stand here alone? The sword edge slowly fell. The huge sword light covered the scorching sun, and his voice came at the same time. My Dibbing Mountain just wants to see who else the Wang family of Beihai has without Wang Tianzong. Let's start from here. The sharp sword light crossed the sky and the earth. Wang Wangyue's figure was directly torn apart by the sword light. Countless elites of the Beihai Corps were also completely torn apart by the sword light. In the silence, Li Tianlan looked in the direction of the Wang family of Beihai. From here to Beihai, it was a long road of thousands of miles. It was his personal expedition. Li Tianlan clenched Xianyuan's sword and whispered, I'm coming. Crack. In the slight cracking sound, the huge and majestic Xianyuan sword suddenly shattered in the sunlight. It broke into countless pieces. End of this chapter. Bookmark for easier reading. Chapter 623. The speeding vehicle abruptly stopped on the spot. The black Audi had driven into Dongshan Street. Wang Qinglei sat in the back of the car, looking at the message on his phone, and a cruel coldness flashed through his eyes. He didn't seem to know how to react. He looked down at his phone and remained silent for a long time. Secretary. The driver in the front seat glanced at him through the rearview mirror and hesitated. Wang Qinglei moved his body, raised his head slowly, and looked at the driver with a blank expression. Secretary. The driver's face changed. Phew! Wang Qinglei exhaled heavily, shook his head slowly and said hoarsely, I'm fine. He looked at Dongshan Street. Dongshan Street was long, wide, and clean. From this position, he couldn't see the lush Dongshan Park, nor could he hear the fighting over there. The fighting was over. In other words, the slaughter was over. He came a step late. What should happen had happened. He looked down at his phone again. The content on the phone screen was like a wildfire, burning all his reason. Li Tianlan had left Dongshan Park. It took less than 10 minutes. The Tang family, a wealthy family in Yuzhou, was completely wiped out, and no one survived. Wang Wangyue of the Beihai Corps was killed with a sword. Countless 5,000 elites of the Beihai Corps were killed. There was no delay in the whole process. It was clean and tidy. Facing 5,000 elites of the Beihai Corps, Li Tianlan directly killed them without any disguise. Now the video of the whole process had been sent to all the high-level officials in Yuzhou. Wang Qinglei also received the video, but he didn't watch it. Just from this message alone, he could clearly smell the bloody and tyrannical scent. From today's meeting, he didn't see the slightest hesitation in Li Tianlan's every move. What he felt was only madness. The kind of complete madness that drove himself to a dead end, with no room for compromise and retreat. Li Tianlan had left Dongshan Park. The scene was already in chaos. Wang Qinglei rubbed his forehead. After a long time he said hoarsely, Go back. Bang, bang, bang. When there was a hasty knock on the door, Prime Minister Chen Fangqing of Zhongzhou State had just sat down opposite Li Huaqing. As the current leader of the prince group, he came today to communicate with Li Huaqing about Li Tianlan. However, just as the topic began, before Chen Fengqing could finish his words, such as arrogant, despotic, and condescending, there was a knock on the door. Li Huaqing looked at Chen Fengqing in surprise, then raised his eyebrows and said, "Come in." Li Huaqing's the secretary rushed in with a complicated look on her face. It could even be said that she barged in. Chen Fengqing smiled and lowered his head to drink his tea. The secretary's name was Su Zian, a rising star of the academics, Li Huaqing's confidant, and the well-deserved first secretary of Jianghu state. It was said that Li Huaqing had released him. If this chapter is not finished, please turn the page. The prince group also paid a lot of attention to Su Zian, but now the character of the first secretary. Chen Fengqing sipped his tea and smiled without saying a word. President Tang Wanson was killed by Li Tianlan. Simple, direct, clear, and without any superfluous words, Su Zian explained everything clearly in one sentence. Pooh! Li Huaqing was stunned for a moment. Chen Fengqing spat out the tea that he had just drunk. "What did you say?" Chen Fengqing asked directly before Li Huaqing could. His Highness Li Tianlan went directly to Dongshan Park after the meeting. A few minutes ago, Mr. Tang had just returned home, and Li Tianlan directly killed more than 20 people of the Tang family, including Mr. Tang himself. Su Zian glanced at Chen Fengqing, took a deep breath, and repeated the news that shocked him so much that he couldn't recover from his shock. "Are you sure it was Li Tianlan who did it?" Chen Fengqing's eyes flickered. "There is a video of the scene, and it's complete." Su Zian said quickly, "I've asked someone to get the video." In addition, not only the Tang family, but also the 5,000 elites of Beihai stationed in Dongshan Park suffered heavy casualties. Wang Wangyue was killed with a sword. At present, Dongshan Park is in chaos. Minister Ji and General Yi rushed there as soon as they got the news. "How dare he?" Chen Fengqing was furious. "What is he doing? What does Li Tianlan want to do? Is he crazy? Mr. Tang is a former member of Jianghu state. He killed Mr. Tang, which is treason." He looked at Su Zian. "Where is Li Tianlan now?" "He's on the way to the Wang family of Beihai. He didn't hide his whereabouts." "Look at the route." Su Zian's face was a little pale. Everyone could see Li Tianlan's route, but that route was too crazy. Or, it was their speculation after seeing the route that was too crazy. "Say it, don't hesitate." Li Huaqing's voice was still calm. In a short time, he seemed to have adjusted his mood. His Highness Li Tianlan's route seems to be to Qin Island. Su Zian said reluctantly. Li Huaqing's face changed. Chen Fengqing narrowed his eyes. From Yuzhou, if one didn't go to Beihai by plane, the shortest route was to go to Liaodong. From Liaodong, he entered Beihai province by boat and landed at the edge of Shenzhou City, the capital of Beihai province. To Qin Island. Qin Island was located in Dongshan, and it would only get farther and farther from Mount Dibing. "What do you think?" Li Huaqing suddenly glanced at Chen Fengqing. "He's completely crazy." Chen Fengqing said without hesitation, "Extremely arrogant." Li Huaqing didn't speak. Li Tianlan didn't hide his whereabouts. His purpose was too obvious. From Qin Island, Li Tianlan would eventually land in the southernmost part of Beihai province. And Mount Dibing was in the northernmost part of Beihai. Such a route could only indicate one fact. He set off from the southernmost part of Beihai because he wanted to go through the whole Beihai by himself. This chapter is not over. Please turn the page. Province. 500 years in the dark world. Since the establishment of the Wang family of Beihai, no one would be so crazy. He wanted to go through the whole Beihai by himself. "It's crazy," Li Huaqing said softly. His voice was very light, but thinking of Li Tianlan's actions at this time, even with his status and age, he still felt a little excited. "He has lost his mind," Chen Fengqing said quietly. Li Huaqing laughed. "If," he said slowly, "what if he succeeds?" Chen Fengqing was stunned, and his face gradually changed. What if Li Tianlan succeeds? Alone, he landed in the southernmost part of Beihai province, swept through the whole province, climbed Mount Dibing, and stepped on the stage of formidable person. This was a feat that had not been done for hundreds of years. If he succeeded and returned to Jianghu State, how should Jianghu State treat him? Convict him? Because he killed Tang Wansen, the former senator? Li Tianlan was not Li Honghe. He did not have Li Honghe's cultivation and absolute loyalty to Jianghu State. He insisted that everything he did was a personal grudge against the Wang family of Beihai. The high-level officials of Jianghu State could only think so. Maybe there could be different opinions. But once this matter was brought to the level of the overall situation, no one believed that Li Tianlan would not resist, not even Chen Fengqing. Li Tianlan was completely a madman now. He did not care about the overall situation. Whoever dared to fight against him, he dared to kill. If Jianghu State insisted that he committed treason, then so be it. Now, it was no longer about what Li Tianlan would do. It was about how the high-level officials of Jianghu State would deal with it. If Li Tianlan came back alive, a heavenly son who could go through the whole Beihai province. A heavenly son who had the full support of the giant group. A heavenly son who had high hopes from the academics. A heavenly son who had been recognized by Mount Shu, Sai City, and even Jade Pool. A heavenly son who had taken back all of Xianxia. A heavenly son who connected the whole Lin clan. Who could accuse such a person of treason? It might be possible to say so. But who dared to say so? Such a Li Tianlan really did not need to care about the overall situation. Just like Wang Tianzong in Jianghu State before. He was the overall situation in Jianghu State. Chen Fengqing's face was a little livid as he imagined that scene. The new era had obviously shrouded them. That was the era of Li Tianlan. It was his own prosperity. He will die on the way. Chen Fengqing said slowly. Li Huaqing smiled and said lightly, "Wait for the result, Prime Minister. Where were we just now? Go on." His tone was gentle and friendly, but in Chen Fengqing's ears, it was with a kind of faint mockery. Chen Fengqing paused slightly, shook his head and said, "Forget it, it's all right." End of this chapter. Bookmark for easy reading. Chapter 624. The early autumn wind swept into the luxurious and exquisite hall with the rich fragrance of flowers, and the air conditioner blew outward. The temperature was soft and comfortable, and the atmosphere was relaxed and lazy. When Deep Dream walked into the hall of Prince Yong's mansion, Wei Kunlun was sitting on the sofa and drinking tea. The fragrance of tea and flowers mixed together. He sat there quietly, fiddling with the tea set in front of him, with a face full of enjoyment. Qin Weibai stood at the window and looked at the scenery outside. The warm light sprinkled on her cold, delicate, almost flawless face, glowing with sacred brilliance. Deep Dream suddenly felt a little awe. To Saint, to Wei Kunlun, to Mount Shu, and to Qin Weibai. The chaos in Eastern Europe was completely over. The Samsara Palace was also completely destroyed. Strictly speaking, this organization could not be regarded as a superpower from the beginning to the end. There was no doubt that it had been standing at the forefront of the dark world in recent years. The destruction of the Samsara Palace did not win anyone's respect. But it got everyone's fear and scruples. The final battle of Heaven Capital, the 3-year war in the Dark World, and the chaos in Eastern Europe. The day of death, the day of judgment, and the day of termination. Until the eternal sword. When everything happened, people didn't feel anything special. But when everything officially ended, people suddenly looked back and found that all of this was vaguely closely related. People didn't know when the Samsara Palace began to promote all this, but there was no doubt that when the almost eternal sword fell, the whole era, the era of the Wang family of Beihai, had officially ended at that time. All the situations from the beginning to the end. Saint Qin Weibai. There was no doubt that she played a vital role in it. Even if the Samsara Palace had been destroyed, these two people, perhaps with the help of military counselor, still had awe-inspiring power. Deep Dream's heart, which had been beating wildly all the way, suddenly calmed down at this moment. She became quiet, just like when she stood next to Situ Tsangyue, the governor. She stood in the living room, bowed respectfully, and whispered, "Greetings, your highnesses." Qin Weibai turned to look at Deep Dream, nodded and asked, "How is the governor's injury?" "It's not very optimistic. It takes a long time to recover." Deep Dream didn't hide anything. "Sit down." Wei Kunlun suddenly waved his hand and said with a smile, Governor and I are old friends. When things in Yuzhou are over, I'll go with you to Mount Tai to visit her. Thank you, Your Highness. Deep Dream nodded. Sai City was undoubtedly a force that had paid a heavy price in Eastern Europe. They didn't have many people. Strictly speaking, they only sent 4 people in Eastern Europe. Now Cool Breeze and Drifting Cloud had returned to Jianghu State with minor injuries, but Situ Tsungyue, the city governor, and Situ Wanjie, the deputy city governor of Fu State, were both seriously injured. Wanjie's foundation was completely destroyed, and he was still in a coma. There was no hope for him to recover. Situ Tsungyue also needed a long time to recover. Sai City was close to Snow Country. If Snow Country really bowed to the Wang family of Beihai as rumored, Snow Country would become a knife of Beihai. One could imagine the pressure on Sai City in the future. At this time, if Wei Kunlun and Mount Shu expressed their goodwill, even if the Wang family of Beihai would not be afraid of them, at least Snow Country would hesitate to act in the future. As Wei Kunlun entered the Invincible Realm, his status in the Dark World had changed dramatically. You don't have to call me Your Highness from now on. Wei Kunlun's voice was gentle. I am now the Deputy Lord of Emperor Dong's palace. Mount Shu will be a part of Emperor Dong's palace from now on. Deep Dream's eyes widened in shock. Now the whole Jianghu state knew that Wei Kunlun was a saint and that Mount Shu was going to join Emperor Dong's palace. But no one had expected it to be so fast. In just one night, the matter was settled? Prince Group. Deep Dream wanted to say something but stopped on second thought. Wei Kunlun's eldest brother was one of the leaders of Prince Group. Therefore, Mount Shu had always been regarded as a part of Prince Group, and Prince Group also had a lot of support for Mount Shu. When the Special Warfare Headquarters was established, Wei Kunlun was recommended and finally decided to be the minister of the Southwest Special Warfare Headquarters. If the whole Mount Shu joined Emperor Dong's palace, Prince Group would go completely crazy, wouldn't it? So I have to wait for the right time to announce it. Wei Kunlun said slowly. This time Your Highness went to Beihai and waited for him to come back. This chapter is not over. Please turn the page. The right time. Deep Dream's face changed. This was undoubtedly the most important thing, and it was also the reason why she came here in a hurry. Your Highnesses, young governor went directly to Winter Mountain Park after the meeting. Now the Tang family of Yuzhou has been destroyed by young governor in Winter Mountain Park. This matter. She thought about it and didn't know what to say for a moment. Killing the former counselor of the Southeast Group in Dongshan Park. Such a loud slap in the face was destined to get crazy revenge from the Wang family of Beihai. This is just the beginning. It's like a signal for the beginning of a big play. Wei Kunlun said softly. A few days later, when Your Highness ascends the stage of formidable person, what can the Wang family of Beihai do? Ascending the stage of formidable person. Hearing this news again, Deep Dream's brain was still a little dizzy. Every time she heard such things, she felt crazy. But young governor only has himself, she said reluctantly. Will you also? I won't go. Wei Kunlun smiled. I wanted to go, but His Highness refused. I wanted to follow him, but he refused again. He looked at Qin Weibai's slim and exquisite back, with a trace of alienation in his eyes. He said lightly, since this man doesn't care about her, what's the use of me caring about him? Deep Dream was stunned. His will is above everything to me. Qin Weibai, who had been silent, turned around and looked at Wei Kunlun. I really don't have to worry about anything. He is my man. This time he goes to Beihai, he is destined to fight his way through the entire Beihai province and stand in a place where the whole dark world can see him. Ha! Wei Kunlun's laughter was mocking. He looked at Qin Weibai with a playful look in his eyes. Your man? Enough, Qin Weibai said abruptly. Her cold eyes became extremely cold in an instant, and there was clear anger in them. How dare you question my identity? If he isn't my man, whose is he? Tell me, whose is he? Her voice was very high, but it was not sharp. It was clear and pleasant to listen to, but it carried an irresistible majesty. Deep Dream's palm shook slightly. Wei Kunlun lowered his head and drank his tea, saying nothing. You don't deserve to question my identity. Not even military counselor. Qin Weibai's voice was cold. You can disagree, but the palace master has fallen. I can't restrain you. If you have an idea, do it. If you don't want to stay in Emperor Dong's palace, get out of here. Her chest rose and fell slightly. The invisible pressure that had been accumulating for many days finally broke out in Wei Kunlun's words. I'm staying here, not because of you. Wei Kunlun was silent for a long time. Neither is military counselor. I know. Qin Weibai said blandly, military counselor is doing it for the palace master, and you are doing it for Tianlan. But it doesn't mean anything. Do you love him? Wei Kunlun suddenly asked an inexplicable question. Qin Weibai's body stiffened for a moment. He turned around slightly and narrowed his eyes. Everyone could see that this was a sign that her anger was about to explode. Military counselor looked straight into those majestic, beautiful, bright and deep eyes. What do you think? Qin Weibai asked word by word. Wei Kunlun lowered his head and was silent for a long time. I'm willing to apologize. I'm sorry. After a long time, he slowly said with difficulty, Boss. Qin Weibai slowly turned around and looked out of the window. Her eyes were far away, falling on the north, on Beihai. She thought of Li Tianlan. After a long journey of thousands of miles, how magnificent would he be when he finally stood on the stage of formidable person? Qin Weibai thought about it quietly. She was lost in her thoughts. Boss, are you really not worried? Wei Kunlun whispered. He was a new invincible realm expert in Jianghu state. Although his realm had not been stable, no one could stop him if he wanted to leave with a Nirvana sword in his hand. Qin Weibai really didn't know martial arts. However, if he went out at this time, a series of unknown consequences in the future would be hard for him to bear. This chapter is not over. Please turn the page. That was why he was so obvious about his feelings toward Qin Weibai. There's nothing to worry about, Qin Weibai said. That's the Wang family of Beihai. Wei Kunlun smiled bitterly. They have been passed down for hundreds of years and have a deep foundation. Who knows how many trump cards they have? The Wang family of Beihai is also shameless. Qin Weibai said softly, Tianlan goes there alone. What's the use of having a strong foundation? The Wang family of Beihai has countless troops, countless cutting-edge weapons, and even nuclear weapons. Will they be used on Tianlan? Even if they don't use these, so many experts are not just for show. His Highness can't withstand the attrition warfare. Wei Kunlun said calmly. Tianlan and Shenyuan Feng can be together. One person and one sword. It's okay, Qin Weibai said quietly. Shenyuan Feng. Wei Kunlun shook his head. I know this sword. Strictly speaking, this sword is actually a murderous weapon. Countless energy and sword intent have been accumulated for countless years. That's why the palace master's sword ended Wang Tianzong. How powerful was Wang Tianzong at that time? It's not an exaggeration to say that he was truly invincible in the world. The palace master barely activated Shenyuan Feng with the help of many half-step invincible realm experts and fire-flaming realm experts. But all the energy has been exhausted in that sword. How can Shenyuan Feng have sword intent now? This is the greatest divine weapon in hundreds of years. Is it useless without sword intent? Qin Weibai turned around and walked over, sitting opposite Wei Kunlun. Deep Dream couldn't help but sniff. The natural body fragrance, the fragrance of flowers outside the window, and the fragrance of tea in front of her blended together, making people feel relaxed and happy. Qin Weibai took a sip of tea and said softly, as long as Tianlan can find out Shenyuan Feng's real secret, he doesn't have to worry about his trip to Beihai. Shenyuan Feng's real secret? Wei Kunlun frowned more and more. It's the 13th floor. Qin Weibai said quietly. It's the core of a heavenly son's lifelong martial arts. Tianlan's current martial arts has encountered a great problem. That is, being too perfect makes it imperfect. But someone has encountered such a problem. The key to how Tianlan can enter the invincible realm lies in Shenyuan Feng. Wei Kunlun's eyes became extremely calm. What if His Highness can't find it? He asked. Don't worry. Qin Weibai smiled. With the temper of that sword, even if Tianlan ignores it, it will show off when it returns to Tianlan. What is the secret? Wei Kunlun asked. Qin Weibai thought for a moment. You got that notebook? She said slowly. Do you remember the few short sentences on the last page? Wei Kunlun froze for a moment. He had drifted in the lake in Lin, and for many days before he entered the invincible realm. He remembered every sentence on the notebook clearly. He had read the few short sentences on the last page countless times, but he was still confused about the meaning. The so-called confusion was an understanding, but not a complete understanding. And if that notebook could be said to be the notes of the Heavenly Sun, the few short sentences on the last page were obviously not written by the Heavenly Sun. It was more like someone added them later, or it was a summary of his short but brilliant life. But there was no mention of Shen Yuan Feng in those short sentences. And there was no mention of the 13th floor. What does that mean? Saint asked. That's what it means. Qin Weibai's voice was very light. Saint thought about those short sentences and was a little lost in thought. The silver moonlight moved Beihai. The stunning blue light shone on Zhongzhou State. The twilight of the horizon calmed the war. The void judgment shook the world. The shadow divine weapon was like the sun and the moon. The Eastern Emperor broke his heart and beauty. The troubled world stopped before Shen Yuan. He still didn't quite understand what it meant. Everything in that notebook was like a legend to him. He silently read the 7 lines of short sentences and said softly, "Are these sentences true?" Qin Weibai glanced at him and said softly, "This is the life of that person. Of course it's true." End of this chapter. Bookmark for easy reading. You're tuning in to the Wisdom Diary YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.